Okay, and we're going. This is the Mystical Mountain Podcast, episode 3. And today I'm here with Hank Kraychir, a Freemason, and he's going to dispel some stuff for us today, probably, and probably enlighten us on some things as well. And we're going to go over a variety of subjects, some of which will definitely maybe test the limits of some people's beliefs, or what they can believe in or what they can be open to, including Freemasonry and the subject of immortality and other stuff. So Hank, welcome, and thank you very much for taking the time out to come today.
Hi, Chad. Thanks for inviting me. Before we get into the questions or the conversation, I did want to make mention a couple things. One is we're going to be covering a lot of topics, and of course, the craft will come up. I do want to speak to the point that I am not the authority when it comes to Freemasonry. Anything I say, I'm speaking for myself and my personal views. I'm not speaking for the craft. I want to make that, we're a very tolerant organization. They tolerate me and I tolerate the brothers, but I'm giving you my perspective. So, and it might differ with other Masons. There, we often talk about secrets and things like that. The secret is is understanding yourself and where you are in this universe. People have these ideas, these visions about Freemasonry. So it is an individual journey, and I will share with you my journey in reference to the topic of immortality, especially.
Excellent. I mean, and that's one of the subjects that is rarely brought up, even in these circles of esoteric knowledge and whatnot. Is the prospect of physical immortality, especially. That's it's probably about the most wild thing to most people to even contemplate. But you've had a great body of work on this subject in a Facebook group that I found originally when I was introduced by our mutual friend Johnny Enoch, um, and as well as some of the blogs you've written online and the videos you have put on YouTube. So if you wanted to, we could start off into that subject.
Sure.
And so the first question I had was, so when we were talking about immortality, immortal beings, what's the difference between ascended master immortals and what I would call physical earthly immortals, or perhaps just really long living people?
Yeah, I think we need to define immortality as most people understand it before this is fully understood. And of course, everything that I'm saying is from a Masonic literature perspective. Some of the great authors, of course, 33-degree Freemason Manly P. Hall, 33-degree Freemason Albert Pike, and French esoteric Freemason Eliphas Levi in particular. I call them the three great prophets. But of course, the contemporary literature today by most Freemasons don't delve into this topic, but a lot of the older Masons, in particular the 19th century, they wrote about it quite a bit. And I'm not saying we've lost our way, but there's a definite disconnection between the contemporary view of Freemasonry and what it was, let's say, over 100 years ago, especially 200 years ago. So most of the knowledge that I've gained is from the older Masonic literature. And so anyone who's interested in most of this information is readily available. There's no secrets, but I found that most people don't read today, and it's sad, but they don't read. And to really truly understand this, you have to be a student of the mystery. That means you have to read, not just, there's nothing wrong with these podcasts and videos. And I like to call them teasers, to tease you a little bit, but you don't go in there and start reading that literature, you're not really going to understand it. But so from a Masonic perspective, I want you to think of three types of immortality, okay? The most common is the one that pretty much the Western world views. Upon death, your soul ascends to heaven, right? That obviously the big one, or the first one that most people will readily admit to.
Yeah.
And I should mention that all three of them I'm going to mention and talk about are about soul development, about developing your individual soul. Okay, and of course, your worthiness depends on what status you will attain. Do you go to heaven or do you go to hell? As in that one they call immortality of the soul. Now, there's a little bit of misunderstanding when it comes to immortality of the soul, because a lot of people they have that view that upon death we ascend, you go to heaven, you spend the rest of the days with God and your family and so forth and so on. But if you are also a physical immortal, you also have immortality of the soul. So if, for example, you're reading scripture, Holy Bible, which is nothing but a book of immortality, about attaining immortality, to be particular. And if you're reading that and you read the word immortal, obviously they're talking about uh, uh, someone who has attained immortal status. But people, when they read it, they think, oh, immortal, immortality of the soul. No, they're talking about physical immortality. Now, when the Bible says immortality of the soul, it has a dual meaning. So you have to interpret that in reference to the rest of the paragraph or the chapter. So, because you can also be a physical immortal and have immortality of the soul, because your soul is in you if you're physically immortal. So, anyway, but the general understanding is physical immortality is upon death, you ascend to heaven with God. Okay. The second perspective that is brought up a lot in Masonic literature is a reincarnation. All right. And again, that's about soul development. From a novice perspective, basically, you're developing your soul, you die, and depending on your karma, you're going to come back again, and you got to do it again. You know, it's interesting. In preparation for this interview today, I went out and pulled a movie, one of my favorites, Groundhog Day. If you ever get a chance, watch that movie. It's quite entertaining, but it really is a movie about reincarnation, or basically you have to live. In this case, the movie, the plot. So I got to live that day again and again and again and again until he gets it right.
Bill Murray, right?
Yeah. It's a fantastic movie. I know it's like 40 years old, but I think it's a great movie. So watch it again. But the key point, and we'll talk about that later. The key point of that movie is that, of course, when he's seeking to get out of this cycle of reincarnation, of doing it again and again, he tried everything, kill himself. No, got to live the day again. He tries to do this. He tries conquest, sexual conquest over females, and he's done all these things. He gets bored. He literally gets bored until the very end. He actually finds true love. And I remember him falling asleep, never having relations with the woman. And he wakes up the next day and he's in the next day, right? He's not having to do the loop again. So he didn't have sex. And that's an important point when we're going to talk about Kundalini later on. So the movie is fantastic from the mysteries perspective, but you have to look at it. Of course, it's a contemporary viewpoint of the ancient beliefs. So anyway, reincarnation. It's all about development of the soul. I remember hearing a story. There was a slave master who owned slaves, and he whipped them and he did all the things that not you shouldn't be doing, especially by today's standards. And of course, when he died, then he came back as a slave. So that's how reincarnation is, because it's about developing your soul. How do you learn? How does your soul learn? Often by making mistakes, right? It learns over time, over lifetimes. Again, soul development, and that's big in Masonic literature. Remember, in Freemasonry, we're encouraged or allowed to explore different religions and different viewpoints. And so there's nothing wrong with us. It doesn't necessarily mean our own personal viewpoint, but we have a greater understanding of other religions because we're allowed to study them. And then, of course, the one that is probably most misunderstood, and oftentimes because of television, and people have these ideas that if they're immortal, they're immune. That they can't be harmed. because of movies and things like that. And that's not true. And I can give several case examples of that in a moment. But so again, it's about soul development. I mean, how is it you're going to be able to live 200 years, 300 years, 500,000? How do you do that unless you have purified your soul? Always remember, and this is a very important theme, you cannot have immortality without spirituality. A lot of people think you can. They're bless their hearts. I love it. They're on a great diet. They're taking care of their temple, their body, and they're doing everything right. They even think they're a good person, right? And they probably are. I don't need God. I don't need, and I'm not saying you need religion. I love this. I used to tell my students, I'm a former college professor. So I would tell my students that, less than 20% of the US population regularly attends church or goes to the synagogue or whatever. And, but if you ask them, are you spiritual? And you delve into it, it approaches 90% of the US population is spiritual. So you need that spirituality. We're built with it in us, not necessarily religion, but we're built within this, within ourselves, our temple. We have this spirituality, this need for something greater. And so pretty much, I'm not saying it's universal, but it's quite extensive. But we have people, some even spiritual, and they're fighting it all the time. They're fighting their own innate ability to live in two worlds. And they're doing that because we've been taught in a postmodern world. Don't get me started on postmodern thinking, but how smart we are. I have college degrees and, you have to prove it to me. Well, how do you prove immortality? Right? Hypothetically, let's use a typical immortal. All of a sudden they're 100 years old, and they realize they're still alive. And then they are this Indonesian guy who died a few years ago. He was 148 when he did an interview. He was 148 years old, Indonesian. But of course, Guinness Book of World Records, everyone dismissed it. Impossible. Because there were no birth records. Well, guess what? 148 years ago, they didn't have birth records in Indonesia. You know how many islands there are? It's even asinine to think it's possible. So they just dismiss it. It's not even possible. Yet today we have 60,000 Japanese who are centurions. We have over 100,000 in the United States who are centurions. These are people over 100 years old.
Yeah, that's a lot.
The knowledge is slowly getting out there. People, and a lot of those are haphazard, in a haphazard state. They don't even believe it. They're just happen to live longer. They think it's because, and it probably is, because of their health and their lifestyle and the quality of life we've attained. But could they do more? Absolutely. Right? And people are starting to figure it out. There's a lot of communities out there. And these are not new ideas because they're obviously in Masonic literature. And we can debate the origins of Freemasonry. The name Freemasonry isn't necessarily over, let's say 500 years old, but Mason. But the ideas of Freemasonry, our ideas, our teachings, are as old as time itself. The square and compass goes back 20,000 years ago to China. So, and the worshipful master sits in the East. We're always looking to the East for answers, because it's an older civilization. A lot of the ideas came from the East. So this idea of immortalism are living a long time. And many of the teachings, even Kundalini and things like that, they all come from the East. Although we have our own names for them, right? We have our different names, and I'll get into that later. So developing your soul, the third option, right? And all of a sudden you realize that you've lived a long time and your relatives are passing away. And then all of a sudden, wow, I may be immortal. Doesn't mean you're invincible. I remember the story of a Hungarian immortal, right? And he had lived a very long, well over 100 years. And he was always seen walking around Budapest, walking around the community. And remember, the life expectancy was about 32, 35 years old during the time. And everyone knew him as just this incredible aged man. And yet he made one mistake, right? And the one mistake he made was during a plague, the Black Plague. He decided to give aid to people. Remember, as an immortal, you serve humanity, right? That's very important to attain that status, the love for humanity. So he decided to help. And he, of course, got the plague and he died. Um, immortals, immortals more than anything else fear ignorance. I've been told that they fear ignorance, and in particular ignorant people, because of television, things like that. They think, oh, you're immortal, here, boom. let's see you stop this gun. No, they didn't say invincible, they said immortal. There's a big difference. So there are immortals who live a very long time, but their own ignorance and the ignorance of other people. And that's why oftentimes, that's why they're not around. They'll serve their purpose by, they might be the spirit world, or the Great White Brotherhood, whatever you might want to call them. They'll be tasked to do something, and they go out and send a message for a period of time, and then they just disappear. And it's called, for very good reason, a philosophic death. And many great teachers and sages have disappeared. Saint Germain, a Freemason. Cagliostro, a Freemason. These are great minds. They always taught immortalism within the Masonic circles and outside of Masonic circles to enlighten the world. And then they just disappeared. They perform a philosophic death.
And what does that mean? Sorry,
philosophic death.
Philosophic
Basically,
death.
they fake their death. That's basically all it is. Okay. Manly P. Hall describes it in his book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, what a philosophic death is. Again, we don't open a book, so we don't know that there's actually a name for it. And so anyway, there are countless examples of immortals who lived, served their purpose, and then move on. One, I'll give you a contemporary example. There was a guy named Ben Abba. If you ever get a chance, look it up. There's not a lot of videos anymore, or audio podcasts. He never did a live one like we're doing right now. It was just audio, radio broadcasts. And there were several websites out there. I think there's still one video on YouTube, and it's about immortal, 2,800-year-old immortal. And so in about 210, 212, in that range, he came out for about 3 to 5 years, and he did a lot of talking about the immortals in the United States and the world. And there were thousands of them. he talked about it. He met one in particular, was 2,800 years old. He was a Knight Templar, and he gave some dietary examples and things like that, and what they do and their purpose. But of course, you learn a lot if you can get some of those old ones. But basically, what happened was he disappeared. He just, all of a sudden, there's no more Ben Abba. What happened to him? Where did he go? He served his purpose. Of course, he inspired me, but he inspired other people, and he did his job. And of course, Ben Abba is a fictitious name, obviously. And but he this is just great entertainment. No, there were lessons there for him. And just as this video, hopefully will inspire someone to do their own research and their own studies. But yeah, he basically talked about the immortals, in particular the 2,800-year-old, which he'd be a little bit older now, and lived in the Mediterranean area, which made sense. And one things I always got a kick out of is, of course, he started as a Christian, right, and then he turned to the Muslim faith, and then he's now a Christian again. And the reason he did that is because the religions and geography would change over the hundreds of years. And to survive, and there's a lot of safety in joining a religion, particularly in certain areas, and particularly during certain time periods. Being a member of a faith or Christian faith or whatever was a survival technique. We know of in I think it was Spain and Portugal, a lot of the Jews were forced to convert to Christianity upon death. So yeah, they converted, and then privately they would perform the religious services in quiet at home. So he told that story, which is interesting, right? Because immortal's a philosophic death. He has to, if he feels threatened, he's served its purpose, it's time to move on, just moves to another country. And keep in mind now, if you live hundreds of years old, you're probably quite intelligent. And so learning a new language is no big deal. So, of course, many of them would just change countries and regions and start all over again with a new identity. It's getting a little bit harder. And by the way, for those people who think this is nonsense and this is impossible, just do a simple internet search and look up people who fake their death.
Hmm.
Hundreds of thousands of them.
Oh,
And they
yeah.
get caught 20, 30 years later. Sad, well, I don't know if it's sadly, but oftentimes because of technology, which didn't exist many years ago, right? It was easy 50 years ago to go to another country, and take a fake identity. And it was no, go to a rural area and start all over again and so forth. But today it's quite a bit harder.
Hmm.
But I remember one case, I think it was, he'd been on the run for over 30 years. But he finally got, he did something crazy, and he got pulled over by the police, and his license didn't look quite right. It wasn't up to date, the new IDs and everything. And so the cops arrested him, did his fingerprint, and found out that he was wanted by the FBI.
Wow, that's a long time.
For a robbery or something like that. So it never goes away. But yeah, and people believe they disappear for simple reasons and also hiding from crime and things like that. So the idea that people fake their death, it happens even today. It's actually quite common.
Hmm.
So people want to dismiss this as nonsense. That's fine. That's because think about it. We've all been taught death, right?
Of course.
Save for your golden years. When you're old, you need this, and we got retirement homes, and we get all this stuff to prepare for you for your golden age. When actually you could live a lot longer. The body itself is designed to regenerate. So you'll read Masonic literature, and you'll hear the term regenerate, regeneration, immortality, and so forth. So again, let me recap the three, and then we'll go on to the Ascended Masters. Okay.
Yeah.
So you have the first is immortality of the soul, which has a dual meaning, but most people have defined that as ascension to heaven. Then you have reincarnation, right? And that's basically, and as my spiritual advisor once told me, he doesn't want to do no more diapers for me. I don't want to do diapers again. Right. And so that's the idea of regeneration. He doesn't, no, I want to stop this. I want to live now. I don't want to move on and have to do this again and again. What a waste of energy. What a waste of time. And so that's the other theme within Masonic literature. And then the last one, of course, is immortality of the flesh. But when you read literature, just understand, when you see immortality, obviously they're talking about immortality of the body, the flesh. And when you see immortality of the soul, it has a dual meaning. It could mean ascension. Also, think about this. If you are, I don't know if you believe in the power of manifestation, prayer is nothing but manifestation power.
Right.
It's your own innate power that is part of who you are. And so we all have that ability. So if you believe manifesting in death, you're going to get it at some point, right? You're going to get it. If you believe in reincarnation, you're going to get it. And immortality, the same principle with immortality itself, if you believe it. And so you talk to anyone who really believes in immortality, death is not part of their vernacular. They just kind of just push it out. They don't really want, they don't attend funerals. They don't want anything to do with that. They want to live a lot longer than people realize. And a true immortal realizes that he may have to move or perform a philosophic death if things get terrible, in particular because of ignorance. Ignorant people and honestly their own ignorance. Oftentimes if they don't live on, oftentimes it's their own ignorance. Why? Now the next phase, Ascended Masters. Okay. Brother J.D. Buck, early 20th century Masonic author, wrote a book called Mystic Masonry. And he lays it out. Like I said, I'm not necessarily agree or disagree with this, but it is an interesting perspective. Most Masonic authors, all, of course, Hall, Pike, and Levi, they all talk about living in two worlds. Okay. And most people don't, the common man doesn't get it, but I think the people who are spiritually inclined do. And we live in two worlds. And so what it is we live in the physical world, right? And we live in a spiritual world. And we know that because when you dream at night, right? We know, and you can have these visions during the day as well, but you know you have contact. And some people are very adept at that, and others are not. And the ones who aren't are dismissive of this idea. But but we know there are people who are spiritually inclined who have contact with both worlds, right? The physical and the spiritual. And so living in two worlds is basically the process or the beginning of becoming. Okay, so where did the mysteries come from? Right? Where does this knowledge come from? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? There are records out there already. I mean, people think they're so smart. Oh, I had an idea. Well, where did that come from? They think it's them. Where it's just universal knowledge, right?
Yeah.
What do they call that? The Akasha records or something like that? It's out there.
Some people call it that, yeah.
Yeah. So it's always there. We're always living in two worlds. Alchemy, right? Or in my case, spiritual alchemy. The early alchemists were very spiritual. And of course, and I love this part because a lot of people, they've got a problem with religion. Maybe the Catholic Church did something inappropriate, or their local church pastor kind of upset them and, doesn't like the fact that he hits up on young girls. I get that, right? We're all human. We make but they make a general judgment about religion based on the actions of people, humans who are prone to error. And so we have this tendency to dismiss religion, right? No, I mean, the religious institutions, I get it. They're flawed. Why are you dismissing their teachings? Right? Don't dismiss their teachings, because there's great stuff in there, in particular when it comes to immortality. And we know a lot of the literature in the Western world is Christian themed. Now you can go to the Middle East and you can get the more Muslim ideas, or there's some Muslim, and of course the Jewish, right? The Torah and things like that. But most of it, particularly Europe centered, Rosicrucians and so forth, they're Christian. So what happens, a lot of people will go into their studies of immortalism and they have a bias against Christianity or any religion in particular. Well, you're not going to find what you want, because remember the records, right? You've shut off manifestation. You've shut off contact to the spirit world. Who's going to teach you about immortalism? Another man? Another woman? No, you're not going to learn it there. You're going to learn from the heavens, right? Your dreams, they're going to guide you. They're going to guide you to a new book. They're going to guide you to an experience, right? And imagine doing that over several hundred years, how much you're going to learn. It's going to be amazing, right? So you cannot have immortality without spirituality. I'll probably say that throughout the interview. So your own bias against the ideas of immortalism, or your own bias in reference to a religion. Well, I'm not going to read that. That's Christian themed. Well, wait a minute. These immortals, they have spirit. And at the time, it was Christianity if you lived in Europe, or it might be something else in another part of the world. There's nothing wrong with any of those particular religions. There's sometimes some problems with the people and even the institutions. Yeah. But there's nothing, and that's why within the craft, we're allowed to, study these other literature and encourage to try to incorporate that into our soul development, right? Because that's what it all is about. So getting back to J.D. Buck lays it out, a simple outline, but basically you live in two worlds and you're developing your soul and your contact with the other world, the spirit world, and they will guide you. Now, I also say God, right? And God is, me personally, I don't think of him as sitting on a throne, even though most pictures depict him as that. God is everything. It's all around it. It's the power of the universe, right? And that's why oftentimes in Freemasonry we'll call it the great architect of the universe as opposed to God, because people think of it as an individual. Yeah. Maybe it is. I don't know. But I have a tendency to think of it as anything around us is God. It's the power of the universe. But also there are ascended masters or angels, whatever you want to call them, and they attain that status because they serve humanity, right? They're not up to they're not up to mischievous stuff. They're here to benefit humanity. Albert Pike. Are you familiar with Albert Pike at all?
Yeah, I mean, I have to do still much more research and reading on him, but I know who you're speaking about. Yes.
Right. So they just, excuse me, just recently they tore down his statue. Right, the cancel culture tore down his statue.
Oh, I didn't know
And it's
that.
really funny. I have an article on Gnosis Masonry about Pike and dismissing the ideas that he was a racist. But you know, as a historian, I just joke because most people believe the lie if it's told often often enough and by authorities. They'll just, oh yeah, he's a racist. Oh, we don't want a statue here.
Mhm.
Uh, he's not around to defend himself. Read his book, right? Read his book, Morals and Dogma in particular, right? He didn't earn his 33 degree because he was good looking. Certainly he was not, but he did it because of his works. Okay. So he said something. And if you read it, he talked about all the cultures and all the races, and we can't get over the fact that he fought for the South as a general, which he was not very good at. Okay, but he was only tasked with defending the Cherokee Nation. Right, he was tasked with defending the Indian Nation. That was it. I mean, he wasn't really an offensive. They wouldn't task him with that because he was an intellectual. They kind of put him off on the, here, you're gonna have a good relationship with the Indians, by the way. Oh, it sounds like a racist to me. He had a great relationship with them. And he had a great relationship with the Black Freemasons, the Prince Hall. We gave him the ritual free. Here's our ritual. You guys can use it too. And so he had him again. Now, this is 1860s, 1872. He wrote his book after the Civil War, and Morals and Dogma. And what did he say? I'm going to paraphrase what he said. And let me just back up a little bit. People will say, oh, he's a man of his time. No, he was a man ahead of his time. If you study his book, you will find out that he was way ahead of his time. We're finally catching up to his ideas. And history will look upon the tearing down of the statues as, what a stupid act. You guys have no clue what you're doing. And there's a reason why Congress allowed that on public land. He was a great intellectual man. And he left his work for us to study. And within that book, of course, it's a book of immortalism, absolutely. But he said this about the races. I'm going to paraphrase. In God's good time, a race will be made real. Wait a minute. He's a racist? No. He said in God's good time, we're going to figure this all out.
A race will be named real?
Will be made real.
Oh, made real. Okay.
Okay, meaning we'll figure this out in time, in God's good time. Well, we got problems, right? He's basically admitting that we got problems, but it's not gonna happen in my time here. It's gonna happen in God's good time. And there were problems, and he talked about slavery, how bad it was, and all these things. So I'm sitting here going, and of course the idea that he fought for the South, that just gets all people riled up. But most people, when they think he fought for the South, he must have been supporting slavery. Well, it's just historically inaccurate. We know, I'm going to go off track here a little bit, but I think it's important because it's his book that gives a lot of the ideas to immortality. The idea, for example, historically, okay, they had the South was made up of either two types of farmers. Okay, there were the plantation owners, the wealthy bourgeoisie, right? They were wealthy and politically connected. Those are the ones who owned slaves. Mm-hmm. And by the way, in South Carolina, I believe there was a couple hundred blacks, plantation owners that had and owned blacks. By the way, and in Oklahoma, the Indians owned blacks. So I'm sitting here, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. This is not a white problem. This is a cultural problem. Okay, slavery was a problem, but it isn't white necessarily. But the other farmers were, I mean, we're talking 90% of the farming, or 95% of the farming, what they called yeoman farmers. These were poor white farmers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and think about this: the poor white farmers, they couldn't own slaves. They would rather take on another wife. They had large families.
Yeah.
Right, 15 kids, 20 kids. I still remember when I was young. I watched on my mother's side. I went and visited some relatives, and they showed me a picture from about 1875 about a family reunion. Okay, and I saw over 1,000 Fogelmans.
Wow.
It was from Pennsylvania, right? And 1,000 of them at a family reunion. I'm going, whoa, And I still remember my son doing the genealogy of my family. He came to me, he says, "Dad, were we Mormon?" I said, "No, I don't believe we were. Our family was." Anyway, he says, "Man, yeah, there's a lot of polygamy going on in."
Oh yeah.
And they were all Southerners. There were a lot of Southerners in my family because my father originated from Oklahoma, and so I'm part Cherokee, of course.
Hmm.
And so I get a kick out of this. And I turned to him. I said, "Absolutely, polygamy was the quickest, most economic way for a poor farmer, a poor family, to increase their manpower."
Hmm.
And think about it. There were no social services, right? Women, they ended up doing laundry or prostitution. I mean, it was bad if they lost their husband, and
Mm-hmm.
they would do anything they can to find a way to support their children. Everyone had to work. And so it made more sense that they became a second or third or fourth wife and joined a farm and to continue living and give a means of support to their family, their children, and then of course have more children. And that was their manpower. So the idea that the yeoman farmer owned slaves is absolutely ridiculous. And because people are trying to discredit Pike. And I have to defend Pike because we have to defend his teachings and defend the man, right? And his teachings, his book is an immortal book. And of course, he talks about immortality quite a bit, regeneration quite a bit, and so forth. But again, going back to ascension, okay, J.D. Buck, the Mystic Mason, right? Mystic Masonry. That is the book that will outline it a little bit more in detail. But and the final conclusion I'd like to make on the ascension, and I've been told this: if you live long enough, you'll figure it out. They're not going to, just as in the craft, secrecy is important. Keep your word. Don't just blab it out. The same thing with the spirit world. I need to make this clear to people. When you first get contact with the spirit world, I remember I got all excited and I said some things I shouldn't have said. And all of a sudden, the visions drop. They stop. And I was talking to my spiritual advisor, and he says, "Yeah, remember now, spirit world's kind of finicky. Unless they specifically tell you to say something, don't. The message is for you only." And so I have wonderful travels all the time. But I don't talk about it because I now know it's for me. It's for my benefit. So you live long enough and you make contact with, particularly if you get in a high, sixth dimension, things like that. They're going to teach you what you need to know. But the first step is to live in two worlds. And that comes from Brother J.D. Buck.
I was going to say, perhaps if you could differentiate a little bit more on just really long living people, like you've mentioned already, and between like ascended masters. Like, we hear stories about people like Saint Germain or Babaji in India, and others who can manifest physical bodies, like their physical body,
Correct.
whenever they want, and walk between realms. What do you think, like, how many different paths are there to roam to achieve such a thing where you're able to do this? And like, how do they go from being like a it's funny to call it normal, like a regular immortal or extra long living person on this planet, to being somebody of that stature who can do such unbelievable things supposedly.
Well, my perspective, because there's no really guidance on this in Masonic literature. Um, of course, living a long time, there's guidance on that. There's some guidance about living in two worlds, but how you would finally make that leap, other than, of course, Christ himself. The Holy Scripture, which, by the way, is nothing but a book of immortalism. People say, I'm not going to believe, read the Bible because it's so offensive. I'm like, really? You don't want to be an immortal then? That's not your goal, because there's incredible lessons in there. And by the way, there's elixirs in there as well, and in Masonic literature. But people don't want to open a book. Um, there really is no definitive. I still want to go back to the idea that it really is what you want, right? The development of your soul. What is it you so desire? I honestly, I don't think you're going to become an ascended master if you still harbor uh, bad feelings, negative or hatred towards others. There are people who are spiritually endowed, and I know of them, and I've experienced them in my dreams. And they were another part of the continent, and came and visited me and attempted to do things, and I'm like, no. And that brings up another point. When you travel, very important. And when I say travel, when you dream, right, and you take control. I would hear someone say, "Oh man, I had a great dream last night. I was making love to two women and all this stuff." I'm like, "And you did it?" "Oh, absolutely." And I said, "Oh, that was interesting." I'm sitting there going, "No, I'm not going to do that. Why would you taint your soul? That was a test. You failed, right? You should be acting the same way in your vision you do in the real world. Your soul desires. That was a test and you failed it."
A lot of people would say that, like, they've done very strange things in their dreams that they had no control over, that they would never do in real life.
Correct. Correct. A lot of it's a lesson, and I agree with you. But in my case, no, I was tempted to perform an orgy, and I'm like, no, that's not I'm not gonna do that. I just literally walked away. That was clear. Uh, Last night, I had an interesting one. I'm not going to go into what it was, but it was great. Yeah, I witnessed and experienced something that was, but I wasn't a participant. I was an observer. I think that would be the distinction, right? Are you participating? Or are you observing? If you're observing, there's a lesson for you there. If you're participating, I would say it was more of a test. That's just my opinion, right? If that helps at all. But yeah, you want to act a certain way, and it's about soul development. And living a long time, you're going to have a lot of experiences, right? You're going to develop your soul at a very high level. How do you manifest? I'm not. I'm my way of thinking and what I've been told is, why don't you first become a physical immortal and live in two worlds, and in time they'll tell you what you need to know. But we do
Mhm.
have examples, quite a few examples of manifestation of those who manifest, and it's well documented not only in Masonic literature but also in the scripture itself. And by the way, of course, I'm a Knight Templar, and we're defenders of the Christian faith. So if that hasn't been obvious to you, um, but we also in Blue Lodge and other bodies, the scripture is on the altar, all right, and we refer to it as the tool and guide of our faith. All right, didn't say religion, faith.
Mhm.
There's a big difference, right? And our faith, and I have extended that obviously to the faith in immortality, but that's also faith in God or the great architect of the world.
Okay. And when you talk about, like, walking in two worlds at the same time, or when we talk about immortality, whether that means ascended master or not, people are naturally going to wonder, like myself, okay, well, that sounds really interesting. How do we get there? What kind of techniques do we employ? What kind of practices do we do? What can you tell us on that?
Well, the obvious one is, people. You have to think of your body as, and I do. By the way, most of the King Solomon's temple was designed as a human body. A lot of the temples in the world are designed as a human body. That's why it's not a stretch to say your body is a temple. It's not. It is. So first and foremost, obviously, what are you consuming in your body, right? Now, I do want to make this clear. uh, Cagliostro was as known as a little pudgy. Okay, so when I think of pudginess, I'm thinking, well, maybe he enjoyed a few too many meals, right? Doesn't mean he was fat. He was, more than likely wasn't obese, but he was pudgy, and so probably had a little gut and so forth. Whereas Saint Germain was known as quite thin, and he also had his own diet. He never ate or drank in public. And there's good reason for that. Not only is personal safety, hygiene and safety, someone might poison him or bad food. That's just, especially during the period. But also because he considered his body to be a temple. He had an oatmeal mix of some type. And, this was over a couple of years ago, but I ate nothing but oatmeal. I had some honey on it and, the good honey, not the it's cheap stuff with sugar in it. Really good honey and cinnamon. And I did my 3-4 meals a day. I did that for 30 days. My blood pressure got so low, you wouldn't believe it. I had to
Wow.
stop because it was like, it was 85 over 50. I mean, it was,
85 over 50.
oh
That's
yeah, it
pretty
was
low.
low.
Yeah.
It was really low. I was like, whoa.
Interesting. Hmm.
And so I'm sitting here going, hmm. So when you get Quaker oats, or I prefer you get something organic, but let's just say
Hmm.
Quaker oats, and it says on there good for your heart, it absolutely is. So that was what Saint Germain was known for, was oatmeal, and I actually did a little test on that, and it was very effective. I mean, I'd say 120 over 80, sometimes a little lower is normal for me right now. But yeah, I would do that, and it works. So he was known as thin, obviously good looking. Ladies loved him, and so forth. So there's actually a lot more information on Saint Germain than Cagliostro. Some have made the claim that Cagliostro is nothing but Saint Germain. Yeah, I'm not willing to go there, because some of the things that Cagliostro did were uncharacteristic of Saint Germain. So, but again, that's here and there. Um, so diet, but we have the example, in the East where they don't eat meat um, at all. They the cow is sacred and everything else, and so they're basically vegetables. But I think that's more of an economic. Personally, I think it's more of an economic situation where there are not a lot of cattle, or all of a sudden there's a big population and there's not enough cattle to feed everybody. So cows, of course, in the United States, are very popular. And so we have immortals in the United States, obviously, who have eaten meat. Now, my spiritual advisor told me, he says, whatever you do, Hank, don't cut out meat right now. You've grown on it, you've gotten used to it. But he says, do you really need to eat that much?
Hmm.
So that would be everything in moderation. I've often taken things as moderation. Can you have a cheat day once in a while, where you go have a piece of ice cream when you shouldn't? Sort of like McDonald's. There's nothing wrong with in my case. I'll probably go to Carl's Jr. today and have a hamburger with my wife. That's sort of our little treat. But what would happen if I had 3 meals a day at Carl's Jr.?
Yeah.
Wow. No, that's not good for you.
No.
And so obviously diet is, I would say, is the number one. I as I mentioned earlier, spirituality. Um, a lot of this information, and I love this, the profane, the reason it's called mysteries and the way it's designed is to keep the information away from the profane. And even when the profane get the information, they'll deny it. And a lot of it has to do with the spirituality. They just can't wrap their heads around the idea that they have to be spiritual. You can't have immortality without spirituality. Now, there are many paths. I didn't say a religion. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about living in two worlds. And religion is an important component. If you're in the West, do not dismiss Christianity. If you're in the Middle East, don't dismiss either the Muslim writings on it or the Jewish. Depends on your faith and how there are different, many paths to it. But in the West, if you're looking at immortality, you're going to be looking at Rosicrucian writings, which are deeply, these are devout Christians. And everything has a Christian overtone or a Christian lesson. And they align it with the Bible and alchemy and things like that. They'll put it all together. So don't dismiss religion as an important component of it. And by the way, the idea that, no prayer in the schools, or, I went to Costco yesterday, and I love telling the clerks, thank you very much and God bless you. Right? I get the damnedest responses, right? And so, yeah. I mean, and of course, generally the older people say, oh, thank you very much and God bless you back, And, but some of the younger people go, okay, they're not used to it. Mm-hmm. Younger people in particular, by the way, younger people in particular are coming into the craft because of the esoteric teachings, but they come in with certain harbored views about Christianity, mm-hmm. And it's holding them back from the quest because much of the literature is revolved around Christianity. It doesn't mean you have to go to church. It doesn't, it helps if you believe in God and have an understanding of Jesus. If you don't, you're in a hell of a lot of trouble trying to understand this stuff. Mm-hmm. Even alchemy, a lot of the alchemists, they were Christians. You couldn't survive. You couldn't write. You couldn't live in Europe during the time of these, these great alchemists. You couldn't survive unless you were a Christian. I gave you the example of the 2,800-year-old man, right? He had to change his religion based on the geographic changes of religion based on battles and wars and falling empires.
You mean so that he wouldn't be attacked or something?
Correct. Yeah. Right now, after the situation in Washington, D.C., you saw what happened if you were a conservative.
Yeah, of course.
Right? All of a sudden, boom. But I'm a historian. I saw the same thing happen to what? Democrats during when? The McCarthy era. People they soon forget. When people come in power, right? They like to kind of push themselves around a little bit. We're gonna put you in your place, young man. And so they do that. This is common. That's why depending on the religion or the power that came in, like the tearing down of the statues. This is nothing new. Are you kidding me? Every empire that would come in, they would tear the statue down from the previous king, mm-hmm. right? Or the religion, they would tear down the temples or the synagogues of the previous religion that was there. That's the first thing they did. They got rid of all the old stuff and say, this is what you're going to think now. And our book burning, we're not going to let you, read this book, or you can't, we're going to, take you off social media. I mean, those are not lasting ideas. All that does is rile the people, and over a period of time, they're just going to reject it. Repression does not work, but that's okay. People need to experience it again and again and again to figure it out because we're stupid. Humanity is stupid.
So aside from diet, spirituality,
yeah.
The obvious stuff, and aside from what we're going to cover here shortly,
I should also mention personal safety.
Right.
Okay. Remember ignorance.
Yeah.
If you want to be an immortal, why would you live in the inner city?
Yeah, because there's obviously a lot more chances of something happening there,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And by the way, do you need to take that airplane flight?
You don't have to.
Yeah. Would you? By the way, it's a holiday weekend. Should maybe stay at home. Right. Maybe travel when it's not so busy. Mm-hmm. Or do you need to do these things? If it's a necessity to do them, of course. Do you need? If the speed limit's 55 and you're going 70, that's your own stupidity. There's a reason why the speed limit is 55 or 65 or whatever it is. It's for your safety.
Unless you think those limits are too low.
Absolutely. But if you get in an accident, because the turn coming up says go 35 and you're going 55.
Yeah, yeah.
It's your own fault that you went over the cliff and you died. You know, I mean, I'm sorry. So ignorance. I mean, I'll go back to that ignorance. So, but safety. You have to think of your life as safe. And you know, I remember as a young man, I think I was at my brother was playing Little League baseball, and I was with my dad, and we were in the stands, and a couple men, and this is, oh my gosh, late 60s, early 70s. And I remember two men were getting in a fight, and everyone goes in there and wants to go see what happened. And I say, hey, Dad, let's go find out. Let's go see what happens. And I thought, and he goes, no, don't go there. He said, you know, in the school, you're in a school and you see kids doing, you know, fighting or whatever. Hey, let's go. No, get out of there. Your own personal safety. Why would you want to even watch it? Why would you participate in it? Get the hell out of there. Because today, I mean, a 12-year-old kid will pull out a 38 and blow you away.
Yeah, hopefully not. Yeah, that's happened.
Right? I mean, this is a cycle that we're going through, right? We've lost morality as a civilization.
Mm-hmm.
We've detached ourselves from morality, which is often based on religious teachings. I'm a firm believer in spirituality. I'm a firm believer. I would rather live in a religious world than a non-religious world, because I've seen the effect of a non-religious world and it sucks, right? No, don't tell me that a non-religious, a sectarian world is better than a religious world. Now, is religion, does it have its problems? Absolutely, absolutely. But the teachings do not, right? Tell me the problem with the 10 Commandments. No, yeah. I'm not going to go there. You know, no, they're perfect. And, but man is not. And so we have certain frailties. So we got to wipe out all that thing. We got young people today don't even know anything about God. And now they're they're really interested in the mysteries, but because their parents had a problem with, you know, the Catholic religion because of molested boys or whatever, you know, they have it in their head. And also think about this, you know, you grow up, you know, and you're a kid. And someone asks you, you know, what's your religion? And of course, then you look at your parents and say, what religion are we? Right? And so you grow up, oh, my parents were Baptist, I'm Baptist. Oh, my parents were Democrats, I'm Democrats. Right? Most people in the earlier part of the age, they can actually go through their whole life doing that.
Yeah. Because
they don't know any better. So if you grow up with the idea that religion is bad, negative for society, and so forth and so on, well, guess what? You can't, your soul development is going to be zip. And I would, you know, if you believe in reincarnation, I would hate to see what you come back as. You might come back as a rat or something. You know, I don't know.
So from your perspective, how much of a link is there between the prospect of immortality and things like, you know, the yogic practices or the Taoist practices, whether that's like using the power of certain vowels and doing mantras or pranayama or different types of meditation?
Yeah.
And
from a Masonic perspective, the literature.
And I was going to say, and what would be maybe versions of that coming from, you know, either Freemasonry or Rosicrucianism or mystical Christian.
Right, because those teachings influence the West. It has to be, it's clear. An example, okay, now you'll take that I'm going to talk a little bit about the Claustrom oil and Kundalini. I think you were leading maybe in that direction.
Yeah, we can get into that.
Yeah, so because it really does tie into that, okay? So I want you to think of the head as heaven and the pelvis as hell, okay? And of course you have the spinal cord that connects, all right? And in the East, they call that Kundalini, based on the Princess Kundalini. And then in the West, we call it the spirit fire. So people get lost when they're reading Pike or, you know, Elvis Levi, and they talk about the spirit fire. Well, what are they talking about? They're talking about the Kundalini, right? And of course, very important, was it J.D. Buck? Was it J.D. Buck? No, it was Manly P. Hall. When he was, I can't think of the name. I think it was on the human body. He had a book on the human body. I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but it was Manly P. Hall. And he laid it down. He talked about the cranium as heaven.
Sorry, I was going to say, is it the Occult Anatomy of Men?
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just was referencing that about a week ago. And he actually talked about the cranium and how an extension of the brain is the spinal cord. We often think of the spinal cord as being separate, right? And so the spinal cord is actually an extension of the brain. You know, we like to think, oh, everything's up here. No, it's in the spinal cord as well. And obviously it's connected to the pelvis, right? And so that's an important point. Now remember, out of the spinal cord comes what? The vagus nervous system. And the vagus nervous system is the antenna of the body. That's what communicates to the other worlds, right? And so obviously having a healthy temple body and developing that is important. So sound, music, mantras, and very important music. I like to use music myself, only because I'm more westernized. You know, the idea of just humming and you know, doing these things, I just didn't grow in my upbringing. So I use music. You know, sometimes I'll use classical music. Sometimes I use you know, just music that makes me feel good. And some songs, especially emotional ones, I can feel the sensations of my body with a song, right? And so what's happening is I'm connecting, I'm feeling the sensations in my body, in my spinal cord and vagus nervous system on a song, and it actually bring me to a tear. And so now I know I'm having a Kundalini experience. I'm experiencing something based on a song. Now, so going back to the Eastern ideas, can you use those? Yeah, absolutely. I'm more, like I said, I'm more quiet. You know, I lay next to my wife in bed at night. I put my headset on, and I have my playlist of certain songs that I know that I'm going to use for traveling that night, and I'll that's how I do it. But by the way, there's more than one path. I'm not dismissing those, and some people probably need that. Me, I use music more than anything else. But the vagus nervous system is the antenna to the spirit world. And so your nerves are important. Your emotions are important. The people who are sensitive, you know, we like to make, oh, you gotta, you know, I remember growing up and my dad would make me do certain things because it was part of my manhood training. But making fun of a sensitive man who has feelings, not a good idea, because he's probably very spiritual and he's in contact. He may not know it at the time, but he has the ability to have contact with the other world. And so that sensitivity, you know, the idea that you're having a religious experience and you're brought to tears, that's a good sign that you have the ability to have contact with the other world. And that's hard for men. It's a little bit easier for women, I think. They're much better at it than some men. But when men figure it out, they have certain abilities that women don't have. So I don't know if that answered your question specifically. That if you want, I can go on to the Kundalini experience.
Yeah. I was gonna briefly ask you before we go on to that. What do you make of the stories in the Bible, for example, of people who are extra long living all the time? It was almost like a regular thing a long time ago in the times of Noah and around there.
Yeah, think of history as pre-flood and post-flood, right? Post-flood, life for the average person became very short. It got shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter until, you know, maybe the Dark Ages, you know, and then we had the Renaissance afterwards and so forth. But let's say the Dark Ages, I mean, we got life expectancy, you know, 30, 32 years old. It was pretty bad. A lot of it was based on ignorance, religious ignorance by the church. You know, sanitation was terrible. Diet was absolutely atrocious. And of course, prior to that, the height would have been, let's say, the Roman and Greek empires in the West anyway. Persian Empire, you know, Persians were great. I mean, they were a lot going for them. But like any great culture, they collapsed under their own weight. But if you look at the pre-flood, okay, the scripture, you know, Noah being a demarcation point, a lot of those, you know, hundreds of years, 800 years, not a big deal. Not a big deal at all. You can actually go back to the Sumerians and 20 and 30,000 years old.
And why do you think that is? Do you think the Sumerians were actually maybe different, like Anunnaki? And in regards to Noah, do you think in that day they were living longer because of, are these spiritual reasons? Are these
These,
the earth at the time, or?
yeah, I don't want to say this was definitive. I've heard of all of those.
Mhm.
And I've heard people say, "Oh, that's a mistake of the calendar. Those don't mean that many." There's the calendar. Da, da, da. Listen, I don't buy it. I don't buy
Mhm.
it. Were they, other types of humans, right? Uh, don't know. Don't know. But I do know that are we basically devolving or evolving under
Mhm.
the theory that we were once gods who lived 30,000 years, and now what are we today? Uh, the theory is we're getting better. We're getting smarter. I mean, civilization is getting better. And by the way, we're not perfect. We make a lot of mistakes, but compared to the last several thousand years, I would say we're getting better.
Mhm.
Um, Definitely. Now, we have in Masonic lore, we have the idea of Atlantis, and the height of man, and there are theories that come out that we destroyed ourselves, or that there was a great event, that destroyed civilization.
Mhm.
These are all great theories, right? And I don't want to take them as definitive facts. But there are valuable lessons that should be considered, and I don't dismiss any of it. I think it's great entertainment, and I think we should take it for what it's worth at this point. It's a theory, like the theory of evolution. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I
not a
didn't
fact;
realize.
it's a theory.
I didn't realize there was a connection between Masonry and
Oh, yeah,
Atlantis.
absolutely. It's in our literature. Manly P. Hall, in particular, talked quite a bit about it.
Oh, okay. Interesting. All right. Well, yeah, we can move in a little bit to that next section we're going to talk about. So we're going to go over
Do you think it might
basically,
be appropriate
uh,
to take a quick break?
yeah, yeah,
Let
definitely.
me check on it.
Okay. So, I was going to ask you about the whole, how can you word this? Like we mentioned earlier, the occult anatomy of man, occult meaning, hidden knowledge of man, of our bodies. They speak about this process in many literatures, most notably, probably the Bible, where, there's the belief that they're using metaphors and stuff to speak about processes that are going on within the human body. Some people call this the Christ oil. Um, it could also be related to Kundalini, maybe in the East, perhaps. We'll get into that if there's that relationship. But if you could maybe kind of explain uh, to the best of your ability, maybe in layman's terms, the process that goes on and how it kind of is tied into the symbolism of Santa Claus and other kind of symbology and stuff we see throughout our culture, and what this process is, this process of raising the Christ within us. Go ahead.
Yeah. What came first, the chicken or the egg? The unknown question, right? Did the tree fall in the forest? Right. I mean, you really don't know. Um, History, leaves us clues to many things. I'm more apt to think. Of course, as a Christian, I'm more apt to think that Christ existed, and that a lot of these are metaphors for this process. That, remember, these were devout Christians who found a parallel link and they named it according to. Now, other people have said, "Well, no, this is proof that Christianity is a lie." I'm like, okay, fine, I get it. I've heard it all, but I'm not willing to make that leap. But I do. There are relationships, and they tied it together, as I mentioned earlier. And I probably be more. Of course, Manly P. Hall talked about it, but in more detail. Um, oh my gosh, what was his name? I'm trying to think of. I can't think of his name right now. It'll hit me in a second. But anyway, It was the author of God Man, the Word Made Flesh.
Oh, George Carey, Dr.
George
George
Carey. Thank
Carey.
you. I was trying to think of his name. Dr. George Carey, George Washington Carey, I think, wasn't it? But anyway, um, he really did probably a better job than Manly P. Hull. They both came out about the same time in the 1920s with their books. But we're talking about Kundalini, spirit fire. You'll find in Masonic literature spirit fire and some Kundalini, particularly with Hull. And then of course Dr. George Carey. I can honestly say that I believe he was a mystic, and he was, if he wasn't a Mason, he was part of some mystery order, because his writings are clear. I mean, if you read it and study, you're going, wow. I mean, he is definitely part of the cousin. And I like to refer to, Masons or Rosicrucians or some, even co-Masons, women, and so forth. We're all cousins, right? We have our own little quirks and so forth, but we're all cousins. We're all teaching the same principles and so forth. So, but I want you to think of course, heaven, hell, and of course to Carey, we're talking about the spinal cord. He referred to it as the River Jordan, or the chimney, right? And of course, the chimney, of course, the fire was at the bottom of the, if you can imagine that, was the pelvis. And it's often depicted in alchemy and other areas as the area around the midsection of the gut down to, because the gut includes the intestines. And that should be important, because that is the furnace of the body. That's where the fermentation occurs. Mm-hmm. And of course, the very bottom, of course, would be the sac, or the penis itself. Often, depending on the male, the size of his tool, of course, would determine what the bottom is. But for most men, the sac is probably the bottom. And so that would be the fire, and then of course the chimney, and of course, if you take the one metaphor, which is the heavens, right? Once you get past the chimney, you go to the heavens, or the astral realm. Of course, there are other teachings that says this is heaven, hell, and of course, the spirit fire, the spinal cord. Now, when I was growing up, I remember, again, part of our manhood training in the dark ages. We don't do that again today. We teach our children to do better than we did back then. But when I remember my father teaching me, when I get in a fight, never hit anyone right here. Now, notice the name of it. It's called the temple. No accident. Everyone, oh, it's just a temple. No, it's a temple for a reason. Someone named it accordingly for a reason. We don't know what came first, chicken or egg. We don't know. But there is a fine sheet that goes across here, on both sides, right here, and it's called the Claustrom. You can look it up online. It's pretty cool, and it excretes a very finite oil, and it's been, of course, accordingly named the Christos oil.
And you're talking about in the brain right now, though, right?
Right.
Because some people might think you mean right here.
Right. You're developing. It's, by the way, you only develop so much over your lifetime. It's very, very, it's very finite, and it's very delicate. Okay. You will develop that, and then it will go obviously into the brain, right? And it will go down the spinal cord. There's a path for it to follow down the spinal cord, and it will end at the sac of the man, right? In the sac. And it, of course, mixes with semen. Okay. Now, very important. People need to understand there's really only two purposes for semen. Okay. And of course, the Claustrom oil is mixed in there. There is a purpose for the semen as well as the Claustrom oil. And a lot of people they dismiss it. And it's very sad that we see, young men today who are wasting the seed. Pornography is readily available, and self-pleasure is acceptable behavior today. Where in times past, they would tell you tales like you're going to go blind or whatever if you do this. They did a lot of that stuff because they were attempting to deter you from releasing the seed without having to tell you the real purpose. And the real purpose is life extension or immortality. Or it's one of the key components, right? It's one of the components. There are a lot of them. I don't dismiss any one of them, but it is an important part of the regenerative process. So if you release it, it will never go back home. It will never be risen like Christ was risen from the dead. It dies down there in hell, in the sack, or on the ground, or however you do it, right? Okay. And even the Bible talks about not wasting your seed on the sand, right, or on the ground. Yeah, don't waste it. Why are you wasting it? There are certain groups out there called, I think it's NoFap. It's very popular. Young men are, say, in their, they start masturbating when they're 12 or 13 or 14 or whatever, and they go on up into their 20s, and you get to about 30 years old, and all of a sudden they realize that they don't have any energy, that they've wasted their seed, that they don't want to do anything. They don't have relationships with women. They'd rather, watch a computer screen. There's a multitude of reasons why, but then they get involved in this group called NoFap. It's just stop masturbating, hold on to it. And so this organization comes out with these, did their research, and they come out with, within 2 weeks or 10 days, your hormones are raised by like 175%. Yeah. They're coming out with all this stuff, and, whereas the media comes out and says, men are losing the ability to procreate. They no longer have, their hormones are dropping. It must be diet and this and that. I'm going, no, they're masturbating themselves to death. That's, from an esoteric perspective, that's what they're doing. Okay. So what are the two purposes of semen / Claustrom oil? All right. The first and foremost, and by all accounts, the first and most important point is the regeneration of life, right? Is creating life. It pleases the heavens when we create life. So when a man and woman have a child, it pleases the spirit world, God. There's no higher calling than to bring children into the world. It displeases them, if you think about it, when we kill life. Who do you serve? And Eliphas Levi, Freemason Eliphas Levi, defined the devil, Satan, right, as a composite agent of evil. Satan as an entity, much like God sitting on a throne, directing people to do what to do, as an entity, as the adversary, is the lie. The devil doesn't exist. Evil exists, and evil spirits exist, and they will tell you whatever they need to tell you to become a disciple of evil. And so when you do acts that are not good, even though you feel justified, how does that develop your soul, right? So aborting a child, for example, they call that a sin. By the way, sin by Dr. George Carey is defined as a lack of knowledge. You sin because of a lack of knowledge. Sin is not, you are displeasing. Remember, immortals fear ignorance, right? And so for a lack of knowledge. And the heavens are not happy when you're displaying ignorance. It's not good. And yet we do that. The most of the population displays ignorance on a massive scale, right? And we see it all the time. It's amazing. And that's fine. I love them, but they're still smarter than they were 200 years ago. The peasant today is doing pretty good compared to a peasant 200 years ago. But we've got a long ways to go. In God's good time, a race will be made real, according to Albert Pike. We got a long way to go, and that's where the immortals come in. But getting back to the process of the seed, okay, it creates life. Not only, and you're allowed to release it when you're attempting to create life within the woman, within her, all right? And so that is a godly act, and so forth. I respect people who say, I want children. Okay, actually, it's probably a good idea. If you're not going to be a good parent, you're not going to be a loving parent, you probably shouldn't have kids. Think about it. Nothing worse than bringing kids in this world that you're not going to raise right. I would tend to agree with them. But if you are so inclined, there's nothing higher from the male and female perspective than to bring wanted children into this world, both male and female. All right. The procreation of the race, right? We got to keep it going. Now, the other purpose is to extend your life. Think about it. Now, people will say, now there's two schools of thought, okay? You should never release it. And there's the Asian philosophy that maybe every, 3 to 4 months, go ahead and release it once.
This is like the Mantak Chia kind of Taoist side
Right.
of it.
Right, exactly. Kind of, you can go occasionally, just to kind of like bloodletting, to kind of, give blood once in a while, so it kind of builds itself back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm not, Dr. George Carey doesn't give that example, but I've picked up on that myself. He believes in saving it, just save it, and so forth. Now, I want to get into the idea, because we have this idea that if we can't release the seed, we can't have sex. No, that's not true. And the Asians in particular, I had a Masonic brother. He happened to be Anglo, a Caucasian, and his wife was of Asian descent. I believe Chinese, but I'm not 100% sure. And I remember him after I gave a lecture in Lodge or something, we were talking about it, and he goes, I got to ask you a question. He says, I never understood this. I remember my wife coming to me and telling me, or asking me, why are you releasing when we have, we make love, intercourse? And he goes, well, that's just what we do. And that's honestly, it's like death. That's what people are taught. Just release it as often as you want. You make more tomorrow. It's no big deal. No, you don't. Not Claustrom oil. Semen, yes, but not Claustrom oil. Okay. And particularly when you're young, it's plentiful. But when you get older, no, not when you get older. And so you want to preserve it. And of course, I've got several young men that who are doing this, and it took them a while, But anyway, this Asian, and he goes, now I understand. He goes, now I understand what my wife was asking. She didn't want to tell him or anything like that, but in my culture, men don't release unless we're going to have children.
Really?
That's what she told him. Yeah. That's what
I still would have thought that most Asians are releasing like everybody
I would,
else around
you
the
know
planet.
what? Like I said, in her circle, no.
Okay.
Generally speaking, you're probably right, particularly today.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. But in her circle, I mean, in her parents and grandparents, or, so forth, no, they didn't release. And so she, of course, relayed that to him. Then he went back and he started practicing it. And we talked, a couple months later, and he could not believe the change in it. Yeah, I got unrelenting energy now.
Mm-hmm.
And why do young men release? Think about that. Frustration. They're all frustrated, or, there could be a variety of reasons, just self-gratification, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, but if you hold it in, you have unrelenting energy. You channel that energy. Now you have contact to what? The other world. That's the energy they're talking about. You're releasing it, and you wonder why you're not spiritual anymore.
Yeah. And the people, like you mentioned, in that no fap movement, which is kind of like the, I would say, like the introductory kind of course into these things. It's not exactly esoteric, but
No.
they, there's people that have a lot of interesting experiences once they start doing this.
Well, you're familiar with it then.
Strange things happening in their life, and all of a sudden getting more attention from people, all sorts of weird things.
Well, in particular, women.
Yeah.
Now,
Exactly.
for the women who are watching this, we're going to be giving away a little secret. All right. Of course, women don't necessarily, unless they're conscious of it, but most women are unconscious of it. So the women that will be watching this will now know, but there are pheromones and there are hormones that are going on. And why is a woman or a man, why is a woman attracted to a certain man, or vice versa? It has to do with procreation. And oftentimes the woman will select the best mate she can, biologically. She's doing this biologically, not consciously. I mean, now that she's aware of it, she might change her mind, and she can redirect her energy accordingly. But most women are not conscious of this. And so they're attracted to men. No, not not weak, guys, but real men who have this, and I can see it. I can see people's aura, and they have this energy in them. I remember one of my students once. We had a beige wall. She had an operation on her right side of her brain, and I remember her head was almost shaved, a little bit of hair. She came to class. I saw her for the first time in probably a couple of months, and I remember looking at her aura, and I could see her aura around her body. But when you saw where the surgery was, boom, there was this beam of light coming out. And I had to tell her, and I said, Natalie, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And she goes, oh, you see it? I go, yeah. She goes, you're not the only one who said that.
Wow.
Said, good. I'm glad to hear that. And many people have told her that they took out the cancer or whatever, that came out. So think about that when you're choosing a mate. Why do you select them? Oftentimes it's this instinct, and it's hormones, right? It's pheromones. It's based on the ability to procreate. So if a man is wasting a seed, he's shy, he's passive, he's weak. Whereas a man who's saving his seed has so much energy. He's ready to go nuts. He's got, he can do, he can stay up all night studying, he can train. Great athletes. We know this. I was a prominent athlete at one time. And I remember the coaches saying, make sure you don't have sex with me,
Yeah.
but boxers, right? Yeah. George Foreman, Muhammad Ali, they all did what?
Yeah, they abstained
from sex while they were training for a big competition. There's nothing new. I don't know if they're talking about it today. I'm not in those circles anymore, but when I was an athlete, that was common knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
You got the nationals coming up. Stay away from the girlfriends, guys. But no one ever taught that, no, you should have sex. Don't release. There's a big difference. And people go, that doesn't make any sense. So, like, of course, the church, the Catholic Church has priests who say, oh, I'm abstinent. Well, I think it was a good idea taken bad. Personally, that's my opinion. It should have been, you should marry, but don't release. And there, by the way, there are Catholic Catholic priests who are married. In fact, one of my Masonic brothers is a Catholic priest. A lot of people think that Catholicism has a problem with Masonry. No, it doesn't, not at all. But anyway, that's another issue. So,
so people are gonna ask right now. They're gonna think, okay, well, how the hell do I have sex but not release? This can put a lot of pressure on the prostate or something. Now, I know in the Taoist side of things, Mantak Chia speaks about inner orgasm, which is going to be a very foreign concept to a lot of people. So what's your perspective on how you should
it's
handle
actually
that?
quite effective. Had several discussions with people, and I'm going to be honest with you, it takes practice. It's not easy. And, I've heard, especially if your companion is quite active, it's very difficult. I often tell men, in particular, tell your significant other, your girlfriend or your wife, or, that what you're doing. Now, women are very finicky when it comes to sex, right? Either they don't want it, or, you're releasing it in me, and I don't like it, but if you tell a woman that you're not releasing, this reverse mode comes in, and now she thinks that she's no longer attractive, or you're not pleasing her. And I've seen relationships, oftentimes when it's spoken, it's not uncommon within a year that the relationship breaks up.
I had a friend, this exact thing happened to him. He was practicing something called brahmacharya, and that's exactly what happened.
But when you have that inner orgasm, and it's not really about an orgasm, but if you feel the need to do it, you're basically testing the ability to release. You're going to get up to the release and you stop. And it is quite pleasurable. It's quite pleasurable. I think about this. You're now in an intimate situation with your wife, as an example, or girlfriend, and you're having relations. Now all of a sudden you've changed your attention from self gratification to pleasing her. So you're going to spend 99% of the time caressing her, pleasing her, and making her feel comfortable, rather than wham bam, let's get going, let's have it, And I love, I'm not saying I'm innocent. I've never seen a pornographic film, but I got to be honest with you. I'm like, these guys are friggin' gymnastics. I mean, and so the young people have this idea that it needs to be theatrical, or I need to put out a performance. And I'm like, no, that's not really what it's about. It's really about assurance or confirmation of your love for that person. So it's what you both agree on is pleasurable. And it may just be a couple positions. It may be one position in particular. It doesn't matter. It's what you both agree upon. But the act of intercourse could be short or long, depending on what you agree on. But all of a sudden you start pleasuring her. And at the very end, if you don't have an orgasm, even after pleasuring her, she's going to start to think something's wrong. That she's either not attractive, or you're seeing somebody else. There's going to be all these things coming up. So I recommend that if a man does do it, that they don't tell their woman, or never admit to it. But women have been known to be quite aggressive, and accidents. I've had some brothers tell me, I had an accident. So it's fine. Start all over again. It takes one lunar cycle, according to Carey, it takes one lunar cycle for the seed to go home. And each time, each month, it builds, it builds, it builds. And at the end of 12 months, you have what they call the anointment in the cranium. And that is the ultimate experience is 12 months.
Oh, 12 months. Oh, okay.
According to Carey.
Yeah. Because I was going to ask, I've heard about the lunar cycle thing, and how you get it or something once a month when your sign is in the
Right.
moon or something. I forget.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at astrology. I'm
No.
not. I'm more of a spiritual alchemist, right? That's the way I kind of perceive. I understand it, and but you can have certain experiences, and so I know, for example, like if you put out certain stones on a full moon, and it has effect on your body when you carry it in your pocket and so forth. I think that's all cool stuff, but I'm more apt to think that the power actually lies within you.
Yeah.
It's okay to use like magic. Magic isn't bad if it's white magic, or high magic. If it's negative or black magic, is bad. The magic itself is not bad, right?
Would you say white magic, is it more so just a tool for
Correct.
focusing?
Yeah. But in magic, they want you, they'll teach you to use an instrument, or, a wand, or a globe, or whatever. And all that is an extension of you. That innate object has no power without you directing it. So the power is within you. So I kind of a tendency to kind of focus more on me, and try to manifest. And I'm not going to go into specifics, but I will tell you the power of manifestation is freaking real. It is incredibly powerful.
I believe it.
But I would tell people, you better do good. I am sort of a, Jesus said, what goes goes around comes around. The golden rule, right? The golden rule. What goes around comes around. Our karma. Okay, call it anything you want. They all have the same meaning. If you are manifesting something bad, it's called the power of 3. It comes back 3 times more powerful. So you make sure you're manifesting good and love.
Mm-hmm. So when you mention the 12-month thing, that 12-month process, this would tie in to, those who are trying to achieve some sort of either optimal health, or immortality, physical immortality. And you'd probably have to go through that 12-month process or maybe
Right.
more
But
or
what
whatever.
aids the rise of the colostrum oil is sex. So don't dismiss I mean, having relations, and some of those
Mhm.
Eastern philosophies, uh, in the West, we're more defined by a relationship with our wife, right? That's kind of the typical thing. And of course, depending on your relationship, of course, when you first get married, you have sex like rabbits, right? But later on, it's 2, 3 times a week, whatever it is. But you want to have relations because it raises the Kundalini, the spirit fire. It aids intercourse. I think it has two objectives. One, it aids in your spiritual growth. If you use it, it's an energy, it's a spirit fire. It also aids in regeneration. Right? Think about Aleister Crowley. We're familiar with Aleister Crowley.
Yeah.
But I love it when people come out and say, "Oh, he was in the black magic." And that's not. I'm not here to disparage this man. He left us certain clues.
Mhm.
Right? You cannot seek the truth if you're out there disparaging a man, even if you disagree with him. Right? You're not going to learn because you're going to shut down the sensors. Right? If you think he was a blah blah blah, uh, and you read, you're going to end up being bored with his book and not read it and not taking his words serious. So he left us certain information. Let's get past the disparaging part of it. And so what did he say just before he died? He says, "I can no longer get an erection. I now know I'm ready to die."
Wow.
What's the lesson? He knew it. He's a wise man. He wasted his seed, and it was too late to save it. That's the lesson to me. He left us. He's there for a reason. There's a lesson in his life for those who are seeking higher.
I wonder if he could have got it back if he went 12 months.
Well, again, when you're old, you've wasted most of it. You don't produce as much as when you're young. So it's more important. And think about it. The body is no longer giving you an erection because it doesn't want you to waste what remaining seed you have.
Oh yeah.
Right? But if you
Yeah.
have plentiful seed, and which means you have plentiful colostrum, right? Think about it.
I got to ask you,
Body's
some people are
regenerating
gonna
itself. It's alive.
some people are gonna ask, where does the information or the knowledge come from that we do only have a finite amount of colostrum? Is that
Carey.
like sorry, go ahead.
That's Dr. George Carey.
Okay, gotcha.
That's his belief.
Like,
Absolutely.
do you happen to know? I don't know myself. Would like, not that they're always right, obviously, things change over time, but would like the medical uh society like disagree or?
Well, keep in mind, I love medicine. Medicine today,
Mhm.
nothing but ancient alchemy, right? Left out for the most part religion, right? There's some that are religious, but for the most part, it's secular. And they made a lot of medicine has made the decision that religion shouldn't be part of medicine, and it is. It should be, just like the alchemists of old. But we have that we have that spiritualness in us. That medicine is medicine changed. Um, I've often said that if man, especially some of these brilliant doctors, are so brilliant, they think it's them. They're not willing to acknowledge that it was God, that it was the records of universal records that they tapped into somehow. That they're not willing to. They think it's them, and they're not their ability to tap in to the Akasha records or to that knowledge that it was already there. We're assuming that this is new knowledge. Well, no, not necessarily. It was always been there. It's just no one relayed it, right? And so they want to dismiss the religious component. I've often said if they would just readily admit the spiritual component of of medicine, we would have been far, far, far ahead. And maybe we are. I don't know. I do know that the powers that be, and that's my conspiracy theory here, we have the ability to live a lot longer. But the way our system is designed right now, what would happen if 300 million people never died?
Yeah, I mean, you could be left with a lot more information and stuff and progress.
oh, we would progress, but think about, can our system support 300 million people that are 200 years old? We bankrupt ourselves.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so our system is not designed, under our current system, is not designed for people to live forever. So um, I don't believe that the authorities want everyone. You think about some, medicine is designed to suck everyone's money out before they die, keep them alive for 5 more years so we can suck out all their money.
Yeah.
No, listen, you need to go to the hospital. You need to go to the doctor. You absolutely go. And
Yeah.
there's some brilliant. I'm not. That's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm being realistic in saying that most people will. Oh, good. I'm cured, and then they go back to their standard nonsense.
Yeah.
And they're going to be dead within a few years because they're not going to change their ways. But yeah, medicine. Dr. George Carey. He was a doctor, and he was a spiritualist, and I believe he was a mystic in some way. And yeah, he talked about it. I'm assuming that he had background or information related to that. I don't think he resourced it in his book. He wrote several books, and you can get them all free online in PDFs. My favorite is God Man, the Word Made Flesh.
Yeah, I have that one. It's
Brilliant.
probably one of my favorite books. Like, I'm not even finished it yet, but it's amazing. It's really interesting. You mentioned earlier how that sex, can speed up the process, perhaps, of attaining
Regeneration.
that level of, I don't know if you physical mortality, or just reaching that stage of optimal health through those practices.
Think of it this way: regeneration.
Regeneration, yeah.
Okay, immortality is the end result of all the things you do, but regeneration, you need.
Yes.
Okay, you break a bone. I remember my daughter breaking a bone. I remember the doctor saying she'll never break that bone in the same place again. It comes back stronger. If you
Yeah.
break the bone, it comes back. It won't. It might go up or down or somewhere else, but it won't do it in that same spot.
So
And
what
the body wants to survive. It wants to live. Give it a chance. Give it a chance to regenerate.
so what I was getting at is that like I think you were insinuating that you could do it either way, by yourself or with a companion, but is it a bit of a faster
I
track
would
with
not
a companion?
prefer. I'll tell you why I wouldn't by yourself. I think most young men do it, and for what Manly P. Hall called materiality, right? They want the pleasures of life, right? And it's materiality is the obstacle to to regeneration or to immortality eventually. But think about how do I say this? If you're doing it yourself, masturbating and not ejaculating, it's really about what? Self gratification and materiality. I wouldn't do that. I think there would be no purpose to do that. However, to show love to another person, there's no greater act. To have relations with the woman that you spent, in my case, the last 35 years, right? To
Mhm.
have relations with that person, that is a loving act,
Mhm.
and it pleases the heavens greatly. Okay.
And is it faster doing that with a companion? Is
Sure.
regeneration faster to happen when you're doing that with a companion as opposed to?
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, it's much more effective to do it with and by yourself watching whatever the young people do. I don't even think about it. But yeah, I mean, if you can, yeah, having a loving relationship with your wife, it brings you closer together. It's very spiritual. It's part of the spirit. Love is having a relationship with a woman is a very religious or spiritual experience that it's hard to explain. And of course, the relationship, having the relations together, is confirmation. Love throughout the day, and then of course in the evening or in the morning or whenever you decide to do it. It's confirmation of that love, and it doesn't have to last. Especially when you get older, this acrobatic 3 hour stuff doesn't make any sense. But you know, uh, you know, you know, having a relationship with a woman for 10, 15 minutes when it's appropriate, there's nothing wrong with it.
Um,
Don't release it. And again, remember the spinal cord, the spirit fire, the vagus nervous system. It's connecting to the world. You're much like music. You have this sensation through your whole body. You're now connected to the other world. Use that energy.
So, in terms of methodologies and techniques to do this, either by yourself or with a woman, we know that there are some very in-depth, detailed books by Mantak Chia, who comes from a Taoist perspective. Um, do you know of or recommend any other types of methods of achieving this regeneration process? Like that, or do you kind of subscribe to that, like his more Eastern philosophy on how to actually go about it?
My perspective is, I'm going to say 98% from Masonic literature. Um, and it's really interesting. A lot of people are. Again, I'm not talking about these Eastern mystics, not at all. But a lot of people come out with these. Oh, this is something new. I'm like, no, it's not. It's been around since the beginning of time, and more than likely started in the East. I will readily admit that. But it's a Western tradition now. If it's been going on for thousands of years, it's part of the Western tradition. It's not widely accepted because of church teachings. Okay, and the church has done a great job. And by the way, the idea of saving the seed is not beneficial to society or beneficial to the church, because their objective is to procreate. Contraceptives by the church, they don't like that, right? They want you to have have a lot of children. And but if you're trying to seek a higher understanding, higher enlightenment, um, you're not subscribing to the simpleton, ignorant view of the world. You're trying to seek something higher. So you might decide as well, I can really only afford 2 children, rather than, when you're young. And this is the problem with a lot of young people. They have sex like rabbits when they first get married, not knowing that there's an alternative, that you could have used your intelligence and not had 6 kids or 10 kids, or whatever it might be, and put yourself in the poorhouse. People generally who are well educated and have resources, realize that maybe I only have 2 kids. I had 4. I was unusual, but my wife wanted 10. I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. So I limited. I compromised, and we had 4, 2 boys and 2 girls.
I heard white people need to start having 3 or 4 kids to kind of catch up to the rest of
Well,
the planet.
second world, third world countries, they have a lot of kids for a reason, and it's because of bad health, bad economies, and the kids die, and so forth. So when they come to this country, particularly immigrants, and by the way, it's not a pun on the immigrants who come here now, which might be, for example, Latino or Asian or something. It has nothing to do with that. You can go back 150 years ago, and the immigrants that came from Europe, they did the same thing. They had large families. All immigrants from other parts of the world come in here and they have large families. And then, of course, by the third generation, you become Americanized. The kids become just as corrupt as American kids. And they realize, well, you know what? I'm kind of selfish a little bit. I'm only going to have 1 or 2 kids. That's generally the typical American. And by the way, the immigrants we have today, by the third generation, they're going to have 1 or 2 kids, because they're going to, have the nice house and the car and everything else. They're going to realize that
Oh, yeah.
kids are expensive.
Yeah. Um, Going back to that, the process of because it's probably very hard for people to picture in their minds, and there are videos on YouTube and stuff, and certain websites that document it very nicely. Um, it might be hard to picture it in your mind from this video or from listening to a podcast. So I definitely recommend people do that. But I remember when I was reading about this, I hear about the land of
Yeah.
milk and honey. Now, could you briefly tell me what milk and honey symbolizes? Like that's something out of the Bible, but apparently it's something in the brain, according to Dr. George
Yeah,
Carey, I believe.
I would love to say I'm more apt on that one. I'm familiar with the term. I don't know the entire
Yeah.
process, to be honest with you, but that is the land of milk and honey. Milk, of course, if you think about it, would be the semen, because it's generally white, and the honey is gold. And if you follow
Hmm.
in Freemasonry, for example, it's follow the gold. Of course, the sun in the east is gold. And by the way, this is a little, and I'm not going to tell you how I discovered it, but I think it should be stated. Okay, I'm not going to tell you how I discovered it, but I will tell you how what it is. Um, over time, okay, um, I forgot what he said, but I believe it was almost a year. Okay, but I think he said it was like 8 or 9 months, and he actually had a release, inadvertent release, and his semen was no longer white; it was gold.
You're talking about, sorry, George Carey or?
No, no, I'm talking about
Oh,
what I was told.
oh, okay, fair enough.
So it's white when
That's interesting.
it's this is a little too much information probably for some people, but of course you release it every day, it's white. But if you
Yeah.
save the claustrum, it turns gold. Well,
Wow,
you
I haven't
don't
heard
know
that one
unless
before.
you
That's pretty
what?
fascinating.
You released it. And
Yeah,
of course,
yeah.
it was. I was told it was released. So I'm going. That is fascinating. It was a little bit in there, but he basically said, yeah, it was more of an oily gold. So
Yeah.
again, I'm stretching, but the land of what? Milk and honey.
Hmm.
It's referencing the semen mix of the semen and the colostrum, because the colostrum is gold.
Yeah, I need to go over that process again
Yeah,
myself too, and that book and stuff, because there are a lot of different facets to
it
it and a
goes
lot of
far more than
details.
we can go in the simple approach that we're doing right now. But I do hope that this
Yeah,
conversation that we're having will inspire people to pick up a book once in a while and read this, particularly those who are interested in such, uh, even if it's just improving the quality of your life. And by the way, as we go back to what I originally stated about the three forms of immortality, for most people, any one of those are acceptable. The idea of going to heaven and living with your family, if, like I said, if you want it, you'll probably get it, and there's nothing wrong with that. And if you want to be regenerated through reincarnation, um, in fact, I remember someone telling me that they had great contact with the spirit world for months and months and months, and then it went blank, and then it was
hmm,
like with another spirit. And I was like, well, where's this other spirit? And he says, oh, he chose to be reincarnated. So, then this is what was told to me. And I said, oh, that's fascinating. So, and again, very important for any student of the mysteries. Very important. Do not use your postmodern training to be dismissive. When someone tells you something, it's for a reason. Don't dismiss it. Even if you
hmm.
disagree with it. Oh, it's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that with me. Put it in the memory bank and use it for later. It's important. The spirits work to you in different ways. In the real manifested world, the spirit will send a person to you to ask you a question, to tell you something, or to give you an experience. So if you're talking to another mystic, or if you're talking to someone, like I've been talking to a Masonic brother who's very, very spiritual, and I never dismiss what they say. I'll never say, "Oh, I disagree with that. Oh, that's a bunch of nonsense." When you do that, what do? You shut down the connections. You're done.
The
You'll
potential of new information.
Yeah, even if you're like, well, that's unusual, but you know what? The spirit world sent you to me for some purpose. So whether it's any of those, even immortality itself, I oftentimes people come to me, they ask me the question just to say, well, I disagree with that. Okay. Why do you want to? Why do you want to have this conversation? Because they wanted to ask the question so they could tell me that I'm wrong. And I was like, okay, fine. That's your choice. You endorse death. God bless you. That's what you want. You'll get it. I guarantee it. But you are what you desire. You are what you manifest. You have that innate power in you, and so don't be dismissive of someone who comes to you and gives you an idea. I'm not. That's why I have a lot of information. I don't necessarily endorse it. I'm hoping that I'll get confirmation later on certain ideas.
So when somebody hypothetically, let's say, achieves this process of raising the Christ oil, the sacred fluid, raising Kundalini, whatever
Huh?
they may call it.
Yeah.
after 12 months or whenever that may be. What
Well,
do you
you can get it
hypothesize?
sooner. You can get it sooner. But
Okay, yeah,
that's the anointment that they're talking about.
yeah, the anointment. So what do you hypothesize happens when somebody is going through this, like to them in their experience?
Well, I'll talk to the Kundalini or the spirit fire. It is, um, again, I've been told not to say anything unless I've been told to say it, right?
Okay.
But I will tell you that it is an incredible experience. I will go as far as saying that one of the first times I experienced it, I went too far, and I was incredibly sore and tired for about 2 weeks.
Wow.
And so be careful. I always travel with the armor of God, the shield of God. I pray and I ask for protection, and I travel to acquire new information. That's my only intent, is to get new information about the quest of immortality. That's my primary. And a lot of these experiences that I have they don't make sense 6 months from now, right? So don't dismiss your dream or your vision or your experience even during the day. Never dismiss any of it. But I will tell you that Kundalini is experience, but you need to know your limits. I'm more apt to use, I call them mini Kundalinis. And I do that just so I can have contact with the spirit world. But I don't, you know, I don't use it to. I did a few things. I'm not going to say what they were exactly, but I did a few things. And I was like, I'm never going to do that again.
You mean
I heard about
during
it.
this process?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like it was too much. I think it was. I think it was Manly P. Hall. But you need as much rest after the experience as you did before.
Okay.
They're talking about rest. You ever heard of they get tired, and they're at a very high level, much higher than I am. These psychics. I mean, they're well endowed. I have to work at what I get.
Hmm.
They just they whip it out, and they have all kinds of stuff. But even some of them will tell you that unless they were told to say it, they won't say it, and so forth. But I would be careful. Study it before you do it. Don't. It's sort of like a Ouija board. Don't do it. Oh, that's cool. I want to try. No. Why would you draw unknown spirits to you?
Yeah.
Don't do that. No, don't. I mean, when you do it, always travel with the shield of God and armor of God. Make sure you're right with God before you messing with the spirit world. You start doing that, you're going to get some weird stuff, man. I've gotten tested a few times.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, no, I'm done. No, I mean, I'm not going there. I'm not
What,
doing it.
when you say slow down, what do you mean exactly? How would we slow down?
Well, you have to learn to control your actions in the astral realm, right? You basically you want, and at first it's hard, but eventually you can control it. I can't say more than that.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
learn to control yourself when you're there,
Yeah.
as though you're still awake but you're asleep. Have you ever had that experience where you're like, uh, what was that called? I had a brother come to me. Oh, he was a Reiki master.
Hmm.
Okay. He says, "Hey, would you like to, as a gift to you, right? After I had been in the hospital, he wanted to come and do that to me." I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." And it was wonderful. And I've had it before, but this one particular experience, um, he had the music on and he was doing his hands, and he said, "I can touch you or not touch you." I said, "You can touch me. That's fine." And it was real funny. He says, when I was all done, he says, "Okay, you're done." I said, "That was short." And he goes, "No, you've been down under for about 40 minutes. I said, "What?" He says, "Oh yeah, you were snoring and everything else."
Wow.
I said, "No, I was awake." He said, "No, you weren't. You were asleep." So remember, you're awake, but you're asleep. You ever had those
Yeah.
experiences?
Yeah. I've had some
Yeah,
of
yeah.
them. Yeah.
Basically, when you're, that's the best way I could say it. When you're traveling, you're you're asleep, but you're awake.
Yeah. Gotcha. Um, I was going to ask you some questions on the Great White Brotherhood or the Great White Lodge.
Yeah.
And For those who don't know, it's got nothing to do with race. It
No.
doesn't mean white people, which sometimes people get confused about.
Yeah.
But I find it a very interesting subject, and I was watching some of your videos on it, and I had heard of it before, but maybe like how did authors who wrote about these groups and stuff, how do you think they got information on the Great White Brotherhood? Was it through meditations or maybe other knowledge passed down to them or something? And maybe briefly just
Sure.
kind of what
Let
they
me
are.
let me set the basis of something too, because based on what you said, and if I stray too far, bring me back, okay? But we got currently going on this transformation in society with cancel culture. Um, God bless. I understand that it's part of the cycle that we go through. We've got to learn. To be a better race. We've got to learn this stuff, and then we'll come out of it. We'll be better. But I get a kick at it. I really do, because they're tearing down religious statues, and of course they're white. And they said, well, that was depicted because a white society did. Jesus was white. It's depicted as white, even though we know he wasn't. Or, and I get this, I love this one. They're tearing down Mother Teresa. And she was like, I don't know, was she Syrian or something? I mean,
Yeah, I forget.
I can't remember, but she was Middle Eastern or North African or something. I was just sitting here going, don't they realize that they're tearing statues down of white, even though the people were not white, because they were spiritually clean? That's what it means. They had a pure spirit. And I can, I will go this far in telling that many of the spirits that I come in, I remember, I can't remember who asked me, but I was asked, when you travel, what do you see? Do you see figures and stuff like that? I said, no, I don't. I see an outline of a figure, but I see basically a bright light, a white light. And I didn't know it at the time, but that's the highest dimension when you see the white light. And of course, when you actually see people, it's probably the fourth dimension if you see other people. And whereas, and of course, a lot of inappropriate activity happens in the fourth dimension, whereas in the sixth dimension, which many consider to be heaven or higher dimensions, you're going to see other beings, light beings. But I remember one in particular, and I remember seeing a group of men, and they were by the way, they were all white, okay? But they were not ethnically European. And I know people are like, what are you talking about?
Hmm.
And I'm going, yeah, you could see the guy was African. You could see the guy was Asian, but they all had pale skin and white hair. And now you're going to get a kick out of this. And so what I was told, okay, do your own due diligence. Get a black man, take a picture of him when he's 18 years old. Then get another one when he's 105. What happened to him?
I think he looked older,
Absolutely.
more
But what happened to
wrinkles.
his skin pigmentation?
Oh, I don't know. Does it get slightly lighter?
Absolutely. And his hair gets
Oh,
grayer,
okay.
whiter.
Hmm.
Okay. Very seldom do they maintain the pigmentation. It's evident in, of course, Anglo people like myself. I have Cherokee in me, of course, and a lot of Cherokees in Oklahoma today, they look like me because we're a mixed tribe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Irish came over and married the Indian. So, what happens is the pigmentation weakens as you get older, and it's of course very evident in Asian and Caucasian. Okay, and of course South Americans as well. A little less so, but it happens as well. And then of course it takes a little longer for the African race. And so, but we find out what are we talking about? We're talking about people, ascended masters, right? Who are so old they don't have any pigmentation. So how do you know? I mean, first of all, an immortal will never admit, very important, it's a lesson 101. An immortal will never admit that they're immortal.
Mm-hmm.
They'll never admit it. Oh, really? And that's the lesson you got to know. They'll never, and if they do admit it, they're not immortal.
So this look that these people had in this experience you had, this would kind of run in contrast a little bit with a lot of the stories I've heard about of ascended masters like Babaji or Saint Germain always looking eternally young or in their prime state.
Well, of course, they can manifest however
Mhm.
they so choose. But we're assuming that Saint Germain is, of course, they always say he's an ascended master. When he was here, down here, uh, was he not doing the work of the Brotherhood?
Yeah.
That's I think that's an important distinction. When they were down here, they Cagliostro, whatever, Shakespeare, all these other, you know,
Sorry.
all these other people, all these people that claim to, they basically were working for the ascended masters. And so again, I'm not saying I came in contact with the ascended masters. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is the experience I had showed me multiple races that were all white, pale skin, and white
Mhm.
hair. And I'm not saying they were the ascended masters. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying the vision I got answered my question.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
was that's all I'm saying. And again, going back to purity, you're going to tear down a statue of Mother Teresa. I'm like, oh my gosh, really? Ignorance. What do immortals fear most? Ignorance.
Ignorance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're like, oh my gosh, we got to do this again. Just like
Mhm.
a reincarnation, you got to do it again. How many times do you have to be reincarnated to learn your lesson? Right? And we got to do this
So
again.
going back to like the Great White Brotherhood itself, which you can see throughout the last maybe couple centuries in various books and stuff like that spoken about, maybe longer, something I don't know, but
Oh yeah, they've always been.
it seems like they're often they're sometimes associated with being in very sacred places where the deserved would maybe see them in nature or something like that, or on mountaintops and stuff.
Sure.
What do you think about
Oh
that?
yeah, yeah. There are several claims that they're in Iceland and they're in Asia, parts of China and so forth. I'm not dismissive of that. I think the Rosicrucians, they're ascended. There you go. They're ascended masters. The Rosicrucian masters were retransplanted from Europe, according to Manly P. Hall, in the North American continent. So that would basically be either Mexico, United States, or Canada. so,
Okay.
uh, but yeah, the Rosicrucian home is here in North America, according to the
And
writings.
and I don't know everything about them yet for those who don't
And
know.
by the way, I think they
Yeah.
did that for safety.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
For
safety.
for those who don't know, the Great White Brotherhood is kind of viewed as being a grouping of people who kind of overlook humanity, right?
That is correct. And by the way, there are various competing groups. There's not just one group.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why.
Great White Lodge, kind of sort of related.
Yeah, they could be like a lot of times, and I found parallels to Freemasonry and your religious experiences. And a lot of times I will say, "Oh, I learned that in Lodge. That makes sense," because now when I get into the spirit world, it's pretty much a lot of the same thing. And so, yeah, they have their competing brotherhoods, but they're not competing against each other in that sense. They're
Yeah.
not who's better or whatever, but they are different groups doing different things for the benefit of humanity. And these are the white robes, by the way, I'll make that very clear. They're not all white men.
Hmm.
That literally smacks in the face of any intelligence whatsoever.
Yeah.
And you'll hear that again and again. Now, you could be of any culture because, uh, you know, a lot of this started, like I said, I believe a lot of it started in the East. So you're probably going to get, if anything, you're probably going to get more people of Asian descent than Caucasian.
Well, this gentleman right here in the middle, he kind of looks like, I don't know, Middle Eastern or like
Yeah,
Indian.
exactly. Well, Jesus, but Jesus is a remanifestation. Again, depending on your depiction, he existed before and after. That again, my opinion. He existed before and after, and think about that. God knew you before you were born, and after you'll die.
Hmm.
So that's not a new idea itself.
There seems to be like certain areas with certain groupings of people who really either they see these individuals or make contact or they think they do. Like
Sure.
Mount Shasta
By the
comes to
way,
mind.
believe them. Believe them.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't unless, as my father used to say, unless your boss wants you to do something illegal, unethical, or immoral, just do it.
Yeah, and I'm not saying I don't believe them. I'm just saying,
Right.
I
But
hear,
if they come to you and they say, "Hey, we want you to go shoot up a mall,"
yeah.
no, not a good idea.
No. But I mean, like one area in particular that comes to mind for me is Mount Shasta. Mount Shasta seems to be a place that is just this center of supernatural and paranormal stuff. And I've heard about people saying, claiming or whatever, they've
Absolutely.
met Saint Germain there on the mountain, or the Great White Brotherhood, or Sasquatch, aliens, orbs, like all sorts of things. Have you been to that area? And
No, I haven't, but I have. Let me see if I have that book here. Oh yeah. Guess I don't have it. Ah, too bad. Yeah. Thought I had it here. It's probably stuck in stuck in my other library.
okay.
I'm trying to think of the author, and I can't think of him right now. But I have a couple of his books. Yeah, he talked about it. He's not. He's a mystic, but I don't believe he's a Mason, so I don't try to mention him too much. But I've read his book, and he talked about those areas, Mount Shasta and so forth. And it's a wonderful book. It was given to me by my spiritual advisor, giving me a couple of his books. And of course, I read it, and it was a wonderful book. I'm sorry I don't have that with me right now.
Does it have like a light purple cover on it? Because I have a book about Mount Shasta. It's kind of got a purple cover. It's called The Mystical Mountain.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
it's within the book, but again, he did this one author. I apologize, I can't think of his name right now, but he wrote several books and disappeared. Uh, Again, for what purpose? A philosophic death, right? I'm not saying he died or anything like that. He did like Ben Abbott. He did what he had to do. Same thing with and for those who are female, um, we have Annalee Scarlett. I've got several of her books.
Yeah, I have one of those here too, actually.
You got Annalee Scarlett? Good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But she was a Mormon, and she was kicked out of the religion because she believed that a lot of the scriptures had to do with immortality, which makes sense. But it went against church doctrine. Right? So,
Hmm.
you know, they claim she, I think she was 99 or something like that, and then died. Again, do we know? By the way, Dr. George Carey, there still claims that he's still alive. You know,
Right.
there are a lot of, remember, they come on the world for a purpose to do certain things, and then they fake their death. And then you get claims that I've seen this person, or they might have ascended maybe to a lower realm or something like that, but they still visit. We don't know. And of course, they may have left their physical body behind and ascended for a purpose. You don't have that much knowledge. And remember, power of manifestation. They might have relinquished their physical body, remanifested in another body. We don't know. We don't know how that works. We know Jesus did it. We know others have done it, Enoch and so forth.
How do you hypothesize people like Helena Blavatsky or Manly P. Hall made contact with like these beings behind me? Because they
Absolutely.
wrote about it and stuff, right?
I have every reason to believe them.
Hmm.
Um, I only because I've experienced probably not the same level that they have, but I've had experiences similar. Uh, but I don't. I'm assuming he was allowed to tell people and so was she. They're allowed at certain points. If they're told they can say it, then they're allowed to do it. And of course, Manly P. Hall and Blavatsky. I mean, come on, their knowledge is insurmountable,
Yeah.
and they knew the rules. And I guarantee you, they weren't breaking them unless they were allowed to.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you heard of like the Brotherhood of the Royal Teton or the Brotherhood of Mount Shasta?
No, but what I'm. Let me. Is this a material group or a spiritual group?
It would be spiritual. I mean, I came across it. I couldn't remember if it was one of your videos or maybe it was another one. I came across it when it was talking about the Great White Brotherhood in general, and it mentioned how there's other similar groups and stuff like that. And I found it interesting. The name of the one is Shasta, and then the other one, the Brotherhood of the Royal Teton. And I thought to myself, I wonder if that has anything to do with the Grand Teton in Wyoming. And I find it interesting how there's a bit of a connection between mountains, certain mountains or sacred mountains, and like
Absolutely.
these kind of subjects. And
You know why
you know,
mountains and rocks?
what's that?
You know why mountains? Because they have rocks, right?
Right, certain crystals and stuff in them, and maybe not
Well,
just crystal, but
why? Let's take the Catholic Church as an example. Why are those all those churches made out of stone, mason stones, right? Why stone? Because you ever heard of the story of the three caves of Jesus, right? Or and of course, as a Knight Templar, for many years before I was the position I'm in now in the Order of the Temple, I was a hermit, right? And what is the hermit? Where does he live? Of course, sometimes he's represented in a tent or something, but
in the
generally the
forest.
hermits you know of, they went to a cave. Why did they go
Okay.
to the caves, right? Or why do religious orders, they don't speak and they live in monasteries, become more spiritual, which are nothing but rock,
Yeah.
and because they want to block out all the frequencies from the world and focus in on themselves and their own spirituality in relationship to the two worlds, right?
I also hypothesize a bit that it has something to do with maybe the energies that surround mountains. I don't know if that's something to do with a vortex or electromagnetic energy, especially maybe on larger mountains or maybe ones that are shaped a certain way. I wonder because there's a lot of interesting phenomena that goes on around like stratovolcano mountains, like Mount Shasta, Mount Rainier, Mount Adams, Mount Baker along the Cascades.
There's an area, you're probably not too familiar with this. It's kind of a little unknown secret. It's probably be a big secret now. I don't know, depending on how popularity of this video.
We'll
But
see.
there's an area known as Joshua Tree, California.
Oh yeah.
Are you familiar with it?
Yep.
You're a
Yep.
hiker.
Yeah, I haven't been there, but I'm familiar with it.
All right, very good. Now go further. Oh, I don't know. What is that? Not east. I guess northeast. Um, Take Highway 62 and go to a basin, and it's called. I'm on the Dale side, but the Highway 62 and Amboy Road, they kind of go, and there's this basin out there. It's called Wonder Valley. Okay. And and we know this because we have the Marine base, which is over the mountain range. And they're directed not to have certain aircraft go into this valley because it messes with their compasses and, their equipment. At least it used to. Maybe the new equipment it doesn't. But right after World War II, they were directed not to go in that area because it
Okay.
messed with their equipment. And there is incredible magnetic energy in there. Well, interesting. If you go to Joshua Tree, and it's about 30-40 minutes away from Wonder Valley, but you'll see a lot of young people, spiritual young people. And I'll be driving through, like I'm going to go out there today as soon as I get out this interview, and I'll go out there and I'll see 500 young people in Joshua Tree on a Saturday or Sunday. And they're just walking, they have their caramel macchiatos and they do all this stuff. And it's wonderful to see, but they're out there for the hiking. They're out there for the spiritual. There's several spiritual retreats. There's certain magnetic energy out there. And then, of course, where I'm at in Wonder Valley, my second home, there is, you'll see people popping up. They'll buy these little old cabins from the 1940s. They'll fix them up as weekend retreats because they know that the spiritual power in that valley is incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a little, and I don't want to go into some of my personal experiences, but I will tell you that I have, not for the benefit of this video, but maybe privately, I'll be happy to tell you, you have to take my word for it. It is incredibly powerful out there. And I can't wait till the day I actually move back there. So I go out and spend weekends and things like that, but we love to live out
I
there full
wrote
time.
that down and I wrote that down in my notes just now. Wonder Valley. I have to
Wonder
keep that in
Valley,
mind when
right?
I'm down
And
in
you can
California.
see
And
Joshua Tree National Park from Wonder Valley.
Yeah. And
Dale Mining District. Yeah.
I know there's a lot of interesting places like that, obviously all around the world. It's not just stratovolcanoes, but I mean, there's Sedona, which is pretty famous for it down there. Death Valley is kind of mystical in a way to
Some people.
me.
Yeah.
And then of course, the Sierra Nevada ranges have lots of incredible spots and stuff and strange stuff that happens in a lot of places.
Well, getting to your
Um,
point about these groups, I'm not dismissive of them. Not
yeah,
they may or may not exist. This is news to me, but I know there are competing bodies, um,
yeah,
and they go by a variety of names. And I think some are. I want to say the ones I'm seeking are incredibly spiritual. I know
hmm
there are certain groups that I would refer to as non-sectarian. They sort of take a middle of the road, and they call themselves immortals. Um, I don't know if they are or not, but I only side with God and His disciples. So, which to me is the Great White Brotherhood, and the standard is incredibly high if you want to be in contact with this group.
hmm
I could easily get in contact with spirits, but you don't know. I love watching videos on YouTube. And, oh, spirit told me to do this and this and this and this and this. And I'm going,
yeah.
yeah, you're talking the lower realms. I don't think you're talking the high
Uh,
realms. Um, no, yeah, I'm still. Uh, I will tell you that I was in the sixth dimension, and I'm still waiting on a bench for another escort. If that it gives you any indication. So I
okay.
was escorted, and I saw incredible cathedrals. I saw incredible stuff, but where I need to go is I need an escort. I don't have free reign to walk around.
It's interesting what you're mentioning earlier about stone and stuff when we talk about mountains and why buildings are built a certain way, like special buildings. There's a monastery near me, a Christian monks live there at this monastery up on the top of a mountain, of course, nearby. Um, and I've gone in there over the years, and I've never been a religious person per se. I did
Spiritual,
not grow up a Christian or
spiritual.
anything. Yeah. But, I went in there in this building, this monastery. It's not like a regular church. It's like a big stone monastery. And when you walk into this place, it's like it feels incredibly easy to me to get into that state of tranquility or meditation. And it's often empty in there. And I'm just sitting there by myself in this huge, beautiful building and looking up at the architecture and stuff. And I couldn't help to wonder, like, if just the mere architecture, the angles, the geometry of this building, and also the materials used to construct it, um, have a certain effect on people that is by design and enables you to be in these quiet states, or these states where you can, be in touch with whatever you're trying to get in touch with, much easier.
Well, and of course you're from Canada in the United States, um, and I would not that the Catholicism didn't have its movement in the United States, but I think due to the Church of England, shall we say, which is uh, but they have their traditions. And of course, Catholicism itself had, because of French Quebec, things like that. You have a lot more, and of course, we know the Knights Templar, uh, had its influence up there as well. So I would say that a lot of the buildings, a lot of effort, time, and thought went into the construction of it. Whereas in the United States, uh, we were more, we were happy to build a wood structure and call it a church. Especially in the plains, uh,
hmm
unknown to a lot of people when the westward expansion happened from about 1840 on. The pastor and the church and the Masonic lodge would open up in every community. And
hmm
so, but we didn't really build a lot of the stone structures that we think of in terms of Masonic lodges were wealthy communities, um, that really developed probably about 1920s, the Roaring 20s, most of those happened. So they were late in our stage of development. If you go into an old
Oh
Western
yeah.
town, you'll see a Masonic lodge, and it was just a wood structure. Whereas, and a
Yeah.
church too. But if you go into parts of Canada, they spent a lot of time and effort on a lot of those structures, particularly because of the French and English influence.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. There's actually, on a related note, there's a bookstore near where I've lived for a while, and I didn't notice until several years after that literally 5 seconds down the road, like just next door practically, there was a Masonic lodge there. And I was like, oh my goodness, this bookstore specialized in metaphysical and
And
esoteric knowledge and all that. And then that just happened to be right
the
there.
church, the Catholic Church, is very esoteric. I mean, if you get into it, a lot of people don't get it, but it's very esoteric, very ritualistic. Where we were
Hmm.
more Presbyterian, or more, we were more concerned with the church didn't have any problem showing off opulence, whereas the were, well, we just, it's a house of worship. We get together, two or more present. We're fine with that. We don't need an opulent building. And so
Yeah.
that was the difference in the cultures, right? I'm not saying one was right or the other. It doesn't really matter. But that's why I think in Canada you'll have those incredible, I mean, even Masonic lodges. You'll have that opulence. Yeah.
Hmm. Um, so I was going to ask you a couple things about Freemasonry, obviously. Why does Freemasonry get somewhat of a negative reputation from some people nowadays, and circles who associate them with other, secret societies they believe are inherently
Well,
bad?
that term occult comes up, right? Oh, you're a cult because you have
Yeah.
occult teaching. I'm like, no, occult means hidden. They're there. And I have conversations with people all the time. I said, you're really esoteric, and I think you'd really, make a great brother. Why don't you join the craft? I said, Manly P. Hall, joined Freemasonry, even though he was writing about it because he was esoteric or occultic in his background, and he joined. And the same reason I think you should join, and that is you're guessing until you become a member. You're not getting any confirmation. So we got people studying this stuff, and
Yeah.
then at some point they realize, you know what, I better join, because then you're going to really enjoy the experience. But I'm going to say media does a disservice. The general, more than anything, though, God bless their heart. You've got some devout Christian. They find evil everywhere. They'll they'll find it in their neighborhood sidewalk. I mean, oh, that's Satan. Lifted that up. I love them to death, and their devout faith is admirable.
Hmm.
But I would say, the biggest enemies of Freemasonry are not the left, not because they're generally very esoteric. It's the far right, not the right, the far right. I mean, we're talking like the corner, over in the corner, maybe less than 2%.
And you're talking about really like
Absolutely, they
religious
find evil everywhere,
Christians, and
right?
and you're coming from a
Oh,
Christian background
absolutely.
yourself
Oh
too.
man, I could. I was, well, of course, I was baptized Catholic, but I remember my mom, joining various churches. I remember going 3 times a week and all day on Sunday. I mean, I get it. I and it set a good foundation, and then I went out into the secular world, and then I found Freemasonry and came full circle. But um, yeah, no, and of course I am. My belief is Christian, but I'm not a far right zealot. I mean, I have my one foot on dry land and one foot on the boat. I can see, oh, you're straddling your faith. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm keeping an open mind, right? And I'm on a spiritual. I've told my brothers. I remember I was an inspector for District One, was it 1A, and I did that for a couple of years. And I said, you know what? No, let's give that to somebody else who wants to go up to the Grand Lodge or to the Grand Commander. I said, no, that's not for me. I said, I'm more on a spiritual quest. I'm not really seeking any high office. That's not my goal. And so, oh, you'd be good. You're level-headed. That's no. I'm a spiritual journey. And so I look at Freemasonry from a spiritual perspective. And a lot of people are like, oh, It's a brotherhood of people bringing together of all races, and it is. I mean, racism. I mean, here I can tell you in California, it doesn't exist at all. I mean, as a Templar, we had the Order of the Temple, and we hold it with Prince Hall. You know, we both participate in the same thing, and both produce Knight Templars, and yet we're two different Masonic orders because we have the same degrees. You know, and so forth. So, you know, and of course, brothers of all races and everything, we come together. And California is way ahead of some other parts of the world, but I'm going to say no. Um, there is no evil, but you can't tell them that. They've got their heads in there. I told you one of my brothers is a Masonic priest, is a Catholic priest,
Yeah.
and he was a high-ranking official. And I'm just like, I thought Catholics had a problem. He goes, no, some do because they buy into the rhetoric. But he says, no, the church doesn't have a stance on these, not an official stance. And I remember many years ago, I think it was the Southern Baptist Church, they came out and they were going to have a referendum. They did a little research, and they were going to kick out all Masons. And
Oh,
they
wow.
found out that they would have lost 60% of their members.
Wow.
Oh, we better not do that. My brother-in-law runs a mission in Mexico, right? And he's doing church work and helping, has an orphanage for children. And we had a talk once, and actually he found a copy of Morals of Dogma, he gave it to me. And he goes, and I asked him, I said, do you have any problems with the church members? He goes, no. He says, if I've seen their rings, and they come down and they build buildings, you know, the church members and their Masons, they go down to Mexico with truckloads of supplies. And he says, they're our most generous members. He says, why would I turn them away? It doesn't make any sense. So some churches endorse it, but you have some that got it in their head that it's some evil group. And all I can tell you is, and sadly, you know, we get a lot of members, young men who go in there and they're thinking they're going to get, you know, they're going to get spiritual magic or whatever. And because they listen to this nonsense on the web, they get in there and they become disappointed because they were expecting black magic. Like, what are you talking about?
Okay. Yeah.
You know, I'm like, where'd you get that? Oh, I got it from the internet. You know, and then after a year, they're like, oh, this is boring. You know, I didn't get what I wanted. No, you're not getting, that isn't how it works. You know,
You're in it for the wrong reasons.
yeah, they joined for the wrong reasons. Right?
Do you believe that, you know, there's been some people maybe at the very top of the pyramid, if you want to call it that, in Freemasonry over the centuries, that have maybe infiltrated it, or maybe some small groups who have infiltrated Freemasonry and maybe kind of given it a certain reputation in certain parts of the world or something like that, and that kind of led to a lot of people thinking a certain way about it?
Well, it's interesting. Two things. Let me start with the one. Of course, uh, I'm the class of 1984 at USC, University of Southern California. I was on an athletic scholarship. And they played a very important part in my education, right? And I'm proud of that, you know, and so forth. Can they be held responsible if I do something bad? Is USC responsible for my behavior 20 years later?
No.
So you get an education in a Masonic lodge, and then you go out into the world and you do something bad. Is that because of Freemasonry?
Yeah.
People think so.
Yeah.
Why isn't USC responsible? Why isn't my high school, you know, my high school physics teacher responsible? Think about it. They're not. You're responsible for your own behavior. You get an education in Freemasonry. It's up to you what you do with it. No one's telling you to do something. You know, if you turn to low magic and you turn to the dark side, that's up to you.
Mm-hmm.
So have there been people that have done bad things who were Masons? Absolutely. By the way, are there bad people who have done things who were Catholic, Baptist? Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
You know, listen, you can get the best education. You can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink it. And a lot of times people do bad things because they're bad people. But does the profane infiltrate the craft? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do they infiltrate government?
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's a given.
Absolutely. So let's not single out Freemasonry as
Yeah.
this evil organization. People are people, right? I'm going to tell you, the majority of the men in Freemasonry, they're just good men.
Hmm.
They want to be better. They want to serve their community. They want to serve their family,
Hmm.
and that's it. They don't have any higher quests, Rob. In fact, I've had brothers ask me, because I'm sort of known as the immortal guy, and they'll ask me, "Hey, I want to get involved in politics. Do you think that will harm me?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Read Albert Pike. He hated politicians,
Yeah.
and he was adamant. He says, you want to have a pure soul, don't be a politician." I mean, he raved against the corruptness of politics, because he lived during that period of the Civil War.
Hmm.
Oh, the corruption of both sides.
So some people will say, and this isn't necessarily me saying it, but I know that people who may watch or listen will say, well, yeah, but sure, a lot of the Freemasons in the bottom or the middle or even near the top are good people, but the ones at the very top, those are the bad ones. Those are the ones where if you actually get up to 32, 33 degrees, they finally tell you what it's really all about. And
Chad,
what would you say back to that?
let's take a break real quick. I'll be
Okay,
right back.
sure.
Sorry.
Go.
Let me answer that. First of all, you have to know the structure of Freemasonry, and then you realize that it is literally impossible. Uh, uh, they just don't know the structure. And it's very important that we realize that we're a very tolerant organization, but to get anything done, it, it's we can't agree on what's for dinner. We joke with each other that, hey, I had a meeting last night and we fixed the price of gas upward. We don't do any that doesn't make it. And do you really honestly think that the governments of the world would allow us? I love the story of Fidel Castro. And when he came to power, he wanted to close all, like any dictator, he wanted to close all the Masonic lodges. And then he came to find out that all his leadership, particularly his military leaders, they were all Masons. And so he had to compromise because he didn't want to piss off his generals, all the leadership and all the supporters of Cuba. So what he did is, like they do in some countries, they put in a government agent. You're allowed to have a Masonic lodge as long as you had a government agent watching over. Within a few years, they realized that this is boring. I mean, you know what was going on. All you do is infiltrate, just bug it. They can see what you're doing from space. It absolutely makes no sense. You think the government would allow a secret Masonic organization to control the world? I doubt that very much. It really makes no sense. But know the structure of Freemasonry. We have 50 states. Okay, that means we have 50 Grand Lodges. And by the way, that's Blue Lodge, and they're more powerful. Blue Lodge controls Scottish and York Rite. I'm a York Rite and a Scottish Rite. Okay, but let me just say, high-ranking York Rite. Okay, I'm not going to go. It's not important. Titles and all that is not important. I usually go for the esoteric information, but it doesn't matter. I'm not going to get into that. People, I'm a 33.
Yeah.
Listen, what I learned I'm a 32. All right, and what is a 33? It's an honorary position, usually based on your life's work of what you've done for the benefit of humanity. You might have served the Brotherhood in some way. It might be charitable work. You might have written books. It doesn't matter, right? You did something charitable and you did it for the benefit of the craft or humanity in general. That's what it is. It's a 33. Now I know there's a super body of 33 based on regions and a ruling. Now, okay. And I'm not dismissing that body exists, but what do they do? And who are they controlled by, right? Think about it. We have 50 Grand Lodges that are not going to allow any York Rite or Scottish Rite body to tell them what to do. It's the other way around. In California, because of the pandemic, we have to follow the dictates in our commandery, right, which is York Rite. We have to follow the dictates of the Grand Lodge, which is Blue Lodge. So you mentioned 33. I love it. When I think of Scottish Rite, I think of them as cheerleaders for the craft, right? When you think of York Rite, who do they emulate? Basically, if you want to be at any advanced level within York Rite, you're a Christian. When you become a Knight Templar, you basically swear an oath to defend the Christian religion, right? And if you want to go up higher, you're basically a Trinitarian, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, and Bible, prayer, the whole thing. And a lot of people don't think of it that way. And I'm sitting here going, and there are less York Rite than Scottish Rite. Okay, and the Scottish Rite are the cheerleaders. And who does York Rite emulate? Jesus Christ, right?
A lot of people, this might be surprising to them because I think a lot of people think that, Freemasons are more like, they're not religious, they're not good Christians and that kind of stuff. They associate them with Illuminati.
No, I'll tell you right now, at least York Rite. I will tell you, and this is the highest levels. These are devout men of their faith. And of course, and within that is within the group of these men is a Rosicrucian order. And wow, they're all devout men. They're all men of religious faith, and they're generally Trinitarian or Christian. Now, York Rite generally, they sort of take the Blue Lodge mantra of as long as you believe in God, right? You don't have to espouse a particular faith, but from the Knight Templar upward, you do. You basically, it's just not going to happen. And you're not going to advance if you're out there not acting like Christ, not in York Rite. So the Scottish Rite are the cheerleaders. They're the ones. When I go to York Rite, I go for the ritual, right? They got great ritual. They're very spiritual. It's a wonderful experience. But when I go to Scottish Rite, they got great literature. So you go to the Scottish Rite for the literature, and you go to the York Rite for the ritual experience. That's the way I look at it. And by the way, I took the path of Albert Pike. Blue Lodge, York Rite, Scottish Rite. A lot of members, they skip. Sadly, that's why there's more Scottish Rite than York Rite. They skip the York Rite, often because of their lack of faith or their disdain for Christianity.
Oh, so you can go through all three of them.
Oh yeah, you can.
Okay.
But a lot of them, even though they define themselves as believing in God and they're Christian, they have something against organized religion, and they seem to think that we'll do that. We have many Christian religions, from Catholic to Baptist to Presbyterian, you name it, we got them all.
Yeah.
And but they believe in Christ. Okay, so, but again, the different bodies. So, but getting back to ruling leadership, you will know that. Tell me by what proof do you make the claim that there's a ruling elite of Masons ruling the world? Ruling the United States, or controlling presidents, or having special degrees for presidents. And I've heard it all.
Yeah.
By what are you telling me this is occurring? What proof do you have other than the claim that you say it is?
Yeah, I think a lot of people too lump in the Freemasons with the Skull and Bones or Illuminati, Bilderberg, Jesuits, Knights Templar, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, Knight Templar, we have our order. We're a Knight Templar. I'm a Knight Templar.
Like some may be related, but I'm saying maybe some aren't. But people lump everything together, like everybody knows each other, or at least the people at the top do, and stuff like that.
No. People say we're not a religion. Well, we are a religion. We're an ancient religion. We're not organized religion like today that is all organized around. No, we're like the ancient religion. It's an individual journey. We're established. You could close all the lodges like so many profane leaders have done in the past. Close all the lodges in the country. Put a dictate. Boom, we're closed. The teachings will live on.
Yeah. And
They've done it before. They'll do it again. As long as they don't round us up like the Nazis and put us in concentration camps, I'm okay.
yeah,
But they did that. They tens of hundreds of thousands of Masons also died with the Jews and the Gypsies and the Yellow Jackets and everyone else in the concentration camps in Germany. They had plans for England. If they knew all the Masons in England before they were waiting to get on. Per capita, I believe there's more Masons in London than any other city in the world.
hmm
Uh, so they were all waiting for that. But it's part of our culture, it's part of our education. That's why it went west with churches. There were no schools, there were no higher institutions during the day. So a man got his education through a Masonic lodge.
and
About
how
how
do
to act.
sorry, I was going to say, how do you think Masonry can shed some of its reputation, at least in some people's eyes?
Doing what I'm doing now and what I do on Facebook and so forth and so on. Some brothers are not happy with it. They would rather, stay quiet about the whole thing. But we need to make our literature available. The only secrets, and this is very important, the only secrets in Freemasonry are signs and tokens. And I'll be honest with you, some of those aren't even secret anymore. But
Sorry, what did you say? Signs and what?
signs and tokens,
Oh, okay.
handshakes, and ways of getting admittance into a lodge. That's all it is. I've visited lodge before, and I was tested, and I had to show signs and tokens. Basically that's it. I mean, honestly, doing what we're doing now, coming out and telling people there's nothing to fear, and there's only one way to find out: become a member,
hmm
and prove it, And of course, you come up with books, and this means this, and this is a pagan religion. Well, you're a devout, far right Christian. I get it. You really don't want to. You're not open-minded, and you want to define your religion as such. And I get that. You'll infiltrate the craft to try to discredit it. We've had hundreds, if not thousands, of people try to do that, and we still exist. You close us down tomorrow, we'll still exist. We've been here since the beginning of time. The 1723 Constitution was quite clear. When did we begin? With Adam and Eve, which is a metaphor for the beginning of time.
Yeah.
The teachings will not end. You can close us, and they'll come back at another time period, when people were a little more open about these things. It's part of the human cycle. We go through it again and again and again. So good luck. Same thing. They want to confiscate guns. Yeah. Do you think people are going to turn over their guns? No. They're gonna ban books. You think you're gonna stop people from reading? You now made it more interesting.
Yeah.
You ban a book, I want to read it now.
What percentage of Freemasons do you think worldwide are into the esoteric side of things?
I'm going to say it's growing by leaps and bounds, and that's going to be the savior of the craft, because they've been so insular for so long, unwilling to talk about it. And so it's going to be the young people, and that's why I do this for the benefit of hopefully those who become members. It's going to be the young people endorsing the ancient teachings of Freemasonry, just the way it was. And think about it. We've had pundit, dictators, despots throughout the ages have done everything they can to destroy the mysteries, and we still keep coming back. I think good luck. Good luck. You think you can wipe it out into the age of new technology, even, get it off the internet. No, it's not. It's nonsense. Anyone who knows anything about it, and I'm not going to go into specifics. We got government agents, police officers, fire, mayors. I mean, governors, former presidents have all been members. You really think that that they would allow such a thing to occur? I don't think so. No.
It is the 33 degrees. Is that related to the? I know it's a sacred number, considered a sacred number, but is that related to the 33 vertebrae in the spine?
Absolutely. Spirit fire.
hmm
And I'll give you a little. I'll give you a little bit of information, unknown to most people, including Masons. Okay. So Hermes staff. You're familiar with Hermes staff?
Yeah.
Okay. So it goes up. Two serpents go like this, and they end up looking at each other. Right. Yep. That is representative of the spinal cord, and that is also the symbol of medicine, particularly nursing. Okay. And that means what? Seeking immortality. And how do you know it's seeking immortality? Now, this is a little secret. When the two serpents are facing each other, that means, or any animal for that matter, is facing each other, that means they are seeking immortality. And when they're looking out away from each other, that means they attained immortality.
Oh, that they attained it.
That's correct.
Okay.
Now look at the 33, the symbol of the 33rd degree, or even 32nd degree. If you ever get a chance, look at it.
Okay.
It's the phoenix with one body, two heads, or some people call them eagles, but they're actually, depending on the depiction, some people it is a phoenix and others an eagle, but it's a similar bird. Okay. It's one body, but both of them are the two heads, one body, two worlds. Remember, they're seeking out.
Yeah.
That means they attained, by living in two worlds, you're able to attain immortality, or you did attain immortality by living in two worlds.
Yeah, I know the exact symbol you're talking about now. I can picture that in my head. I've seen that for sure. Yeah, that's interesting.
So hopefully we'll have a rush on people buying Morals and Dogmas.
Yeah, that would be good.
But I'll be honest with you. If you only have an 8th grade education, a standard education in America, it's a difficult read. That's what the standard education is, about 8th, 9th grade level education, right?
Yeah.
I've been blessed. I have multiple masters. I have 3 master's degrees, and one of them is liberal studies. So I understand the old writings a little bit better than most, and so I've been able to break that down for the followers on my blog and so forth.
Yeah.
My YouTube channel, my new YouTube channel. But I break it down slowly. Those who follow will eventually. I've had several members, 7, 8 years now, and they still remember way back when I actually wrote Masonry and the Three Little Pigs. And I was like, wow, you guys been following me a long time. But yeah, they've come a long way, and they get it. They go, oh, we get it now. It takes years of study and patience to understand Albert Pike and Morals and Dogma. But it helps if you read Eliphas Levi, and you get a little bit of help along the way. And of course, Manly P. Hall is a little simpler. I like Manly P. Hall because he simplifies things. But
I love Manly P. Hall.
Oh yeah, well, he's Canadian, isn't he?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's Canadian. Right? So yeah, no, he is a great man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're assuming he's dead, right?
Yeah. I was gonna say, what kind of importance should somebody place on the symbols and symbolism, not only in Freemasonry but in in all esoteric kingdom and occult literature, compared to just doing the practices, retaining or having the good habits, the diet, or excuse me, the raising of the Christ oil and stuff, because they are related, obviously. Can one achieve the ultimate goal without knowing both of these aspects?
I don't want to ever say that you can't attain immortality without Freemasonry. That would be naive. But I would say that the information is available in Freemasonry if you're so interested. There are more than one path, obviously, and there are other people have attained immortality without Freemasonry. I believe that. But what is it you want, right? Let's take the idea. Why does a man or a family? Why do we have the tradition of going to church on Sunday? What is the main purpose?
I would think to renew your faith.
Right, remind you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we are human. The further and further we get away from our teaching, our understanding of things, we're going to slip away little by little. Well, it's not that important. I don't think that's important. I don't want to do that. So, symbolism. When you see a symbol, it's a reminder, right? When I see that, I know what that means. Or, very important, and this is a little unknown to a lot of people, I can go into a crowded room, and usually within 10, 15 minutes, I can figure out who the Mason is. For their behavior, their actions, their demeanor, their wordage, their verbiage. You can tell. And so there's a valuable teaching within the craft that there is nowhere else. And I'm proud of my university degrees, but I got nothing there. I got basically postmodern education, which I appreciate because I now understand what not to do. But there's an education in Freemasonry that there is nowhere else. Where are you going to learn to be a man? In school? No, definitely not. No, it's not going to happen, right? Where are you going to, families? No, they're dissolving quicker than anything else.
Mm.
Where are you going to learn to be a good leader? Where are you going to learn to live healthy, to be a good citizen? All the teachings of Freemasonry are there. It's all there for you. You could, and by the way, the ultimate goal is, of course, immortality. One of the three, whatever you choose. It's your path. Like I said, most people are happy with the first one. Some are happy with the second one, you know, and of course, there are a few others that are designed great. And, you know, if you don't receive the third option, nothing wrong with the other two options as well. But very important that you, whatever path you take, I think everyone will agree that it is about your soul development. I don't think that you can attain that if you're an evil person, if you're part of the profane. I just don't think it's possible.
So I got a question for you. Obviously there are evil forces at play in this world.
Yeah.
There's evil people, there's evil groups of people. You know, in your opinion, if you have an idea on this matter, do you think there are specific groups out there? You know, we'll talk about the elite, um, that run things in the world, or run certain countries, or run the all the federal banking cartel system and all that kind of stuff. And not that you have to name them, but if you wanted to, you could go ahead. But what do you think about that whole thing?
I think they're run by people who have the best intentions based on their worldly knowledge, not their spiritual knowledge. They're trying their best. What we're experiencing right now and throughout history is one vast experience, one experiment that must play itself out. But it's run by good intentioned people who don't know any better. Honestly,
You don't think there's anyone with bad intentions?
well, of course, but their intentions. I don't want to attack a particular person or group.
Yeah.
I think that would be inappropriate. But they are people who will use evil because they think it's good.
Okay, I get you.
Okay, they will do whatever. And for example, we've got a political party in the United States who will do every means possible to gain control, to do what they want because they think what they want is good for the country. So ultimately, they want what they, you know, and obviously they're getting it. And I've been told to let it play itself out, right? And if the people, you know, I understand there's a lot of remorse going on right now among Democrats in the United States. You know, they're displeased with what they got, but you know what? You have to learn. You can't tell people anything. They have to experience it for themselves.
Well, that's often true.
Yeah, you can't tell someone that they're wrong. No, never tell anyone they're wrong. You know, you guide them, right? And oftentimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We're going somewhere. This is a grand experiment for humanity. As long as we don't blow it, we'll be fine. And right now, it's growing pains. We in like Pike in God's good time, a race will be made real. We will figure this out by the will of the people. But you have to wake up certain groups. Otherwise, they will continue to garner control. And at some point, evil will always destroy itself. That's evident. History is quite clear because the people won't allow it at some point. You know, that's why in the past they would just do baby steps along the way. Now they're just come out and just doing things, whatever because they feel they got control and they want to change the Constitution and everything else. Ultimately, it's a bad idea. It will backfire dramatically. But you know what? You can't tell them that because they want to experience it. They want that power. Yeah. And Pike was quite clear. You can't stop that. When the crowd is going, the best thing is just get out of the way. You know, why martyr yourself? Why put yourself up, you know, and be troubled? Just play it safe. I told you again, the biggest fear of an immortal is ignorance. Don't be there. And if there's a fight going on, don't be there. If there's a riot,
Yeah.
don't be there.
So another thing I was going to ask you about, a little bit unrelated to that now, to shift gears a little bit. What do you think about the subject of entities or beings from different, some people call them astral realms, some people call them lower realms, different dimensions, aliens, demons? What do you think about all of those
I'm not as
together?
adept as our friend Johnny Enoch when it comes to aliens. I enjoy my
Oh yeah.
conversations that we've had in the past with him, but do
Yeah.
alien beings exist? I'm not willing to deny it. I'm not an expert on it, to be honest with you. But a lot of people are now redefining aliens with spirits and putting them together and manifesting and so forth. I'm more of a spiritual alchemist, like I said. I kind of deal more in the spirituality of things. But there are dimensions. Of course, you know, I know that oftentimes people will refer to the sixth dimension as heaven, but there are higher dimensions. But all that is based on what? Soul development, worthiness, right? They're not just going to let you in, right? You've got to prove yourself, like a lodge, right? You want to become a member, you got to prove yourself. Fourth dimension, some creepy stuff going on in the fourth dimension. I would advise just to bypass the fourth dimension. Don't even mess with it. That's where the bad stuff happens.
I was trying to understand that because, like, I mean, we're in the third dimension, so I would have thought one up would have been a little better.
Yeah, you would think so, but that's where the lower entities exist. That's where the creepy stuff happens. You have lost souls, shall we say, and they love playing with people, and they love, they'll tell you that, oh, I'm God, listen to me, No, I'm like, I've been to I've been to the fourth dimension. I think most of my life I was in the fourth dimension when you're dreaming. The experiences you had in your early dreams, clearly those are fourth dimension activities. But and of course you go to the fifth and you get a little better, and then of course the sixth. Yeah, that's a very high realm, and of course there's the seventh, and I heard there was 9 and 10. And, I don't know. I've only been to the sixth dimension, so I don't
I
know.
think different people have different ideas and systems for that. It varies.
Yeah, right. But the dimensional activity does exist. Again, you manifest what you want, and I, of course, wanted to experience that. I was clear on the escort and everything else. I'd say most of my activity, activities in the fifth dimension, me personally. I try to bypass the fourth if I can. Sometimes I'm taken there, but I think oftentimes the fourth dimension is a test. To say, hey, how you doing? Hey, let's see how you're doing now. It's some weird stuff, man. I'm like, I'm out of here. I don't think so. But yeah, oftentimes keep in mind it's all about soul development. So your travels, particularly when you're sleeping, or even your experiences, as I mentioned earlier, your experiences of who you meet and talk with, and a lot of times people will come to you with an idea or something. That's part of your growth experience, your soul development. So don't dismiss the relationships that you have, even our relationship today. Don't be dismissive of it and say, well, I'm glad this is over. I don't want to do that again. Maybe there's something that you said to me, a question, or vice versa. My answer to you might influence you, and of course, other people, other influences, so forth. So every action, behavior, word, thought is all part of your soul development. Oh, and another thing, I always thought this was cool. Computers, you're on the computer, every keystroke is recorded somewhere, right? On the internet. Yeah. And so the government can come in and, if your house burnt down, the first thing they're going to do is confiscate your computer records, right? Or your internet records from your provider. And what are they going to do? How to burn your house down. If you in the last 5 years looked up how to burn your house down, you're guilty. You're in trouble. They recorded forever. That's how your soul works, right? That's how your soul works. Everything you did, it's recorded, right? It's there forever, right? And so, depending on, I would hope that young people would figure this out so they don't have to, work on their soul development and take it serious throughout their life and develop that. Whereas, a lot of older people, I got into this in my late 40s and early 50s. So you can tell I screwed up a lot prior to
um, you mentioned earlier when I was talking to you, I think before we started recording, what is the relationship between Freemasonry and Atlantis?
Well, Manly P. Hall was big on writing about that. He believes that Freemasonry was the beginning um, of Masonic teaching. So the story of Atlantis is, of course, a folklore story, and I'm assuming he had reason to believe that, and I have to accept it based on face value at this point. But it is a theory, and I take theories. What's a fact? How do you prove that? It's a theory, and it's a great theory. It's a great story. It explains so much about our origins, not only Freemasonry, but society itself. And also tells us it's a story of hope for humanity in the future, that we can attain that knowledge again.
Yeah, yeah. I find that interesting. And have you heard of a gentleman named Dorial from the 1920s or 30s that was supposedly part of the Great White Brotherhood? I think I may have asked you this before, but he uh, supposedly translated the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, not to be confused with the Emerald Tablet by Hermes Trismegistus. Um, I've read those tablets, these supposed tablets, anyways, and I don't know if it's legitimate or not, but either way, whoever wrote them and the way they wrote them, it's pretty unbelievable. Just how poetic it is and how it speaks on many
We're
levels at the same
always,
time.
and with all due respect, we're always looking for facts. Right? We're always looking for the truth,
Yeah.
and rather than just take the story on face value and say that there's something there to be taught us, something to learn. Someone took the time to write that. It's like the Bible. Was it written by God? No. Was it written by man with good intentions? Absolutely. And was it, the Masonic literature? These are wise men who took years, decades to write wonderful literature, worthy of our time and study. I would ask. I don't know much about this guy. Did he admit he was an immortal?
No, he didn't speak really about himself
Okay,
much. It
very
was
good.
more so
Because if
just
he
about,
did, he wasn't an immortal.
yeah, no, he didn't say that
Okay,
to my
very good.
knowledge.
Make that clear.
No.
If people thought he was an immortal, that's another story. But he took the time to interpret and write that, and there's probably something in there worthy enough to study it to
Yeah.
the interested student.
Yeah.
So don't I, faith is different than postmodern thinking, right? We want to just do away with well, there was no proof, so it has no value.
Yeah.
Really? No, there's a lot of value. Someone took some time to write that down. I'm looking from a scholastic perspective, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And that's how I was raised. And I was a professor for several years. So that's the way I taught my students. I said, someone took the time to write that. It's probably something worth reading. It will probably have some value to you rather than read it and then go on the internet and write a scathing review
Yeah.
because it glorifies yourself. I dismiss these scathing reviews,
Hmm.
Amazon and everything. That's absolutely nonsense. Okay, why don't you pick up a book? That there is something in that book for you. And by the way, if anyone ever gives you a book, read it.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to think that that book was from the person. No, it wasn't. It was sent to you from the heavens. Someone felt overly compelled to give you a book for some unknown reason. It was a gift from heaven. And that's how the spirit world works.
Yeah.
Read the book and then put it aside. Don't be dismissive of it. You don't have to agree with it, but don't be dismissive of it.
Yeah, good idea. That's an interesting you mentioned that. I've had some funny experiences where I've been thinking about a certain subject or I've been looking for something in particular, and then I'll be looking through a bookstore or somewhere else, and I'll just come across a book that's related to it
Buy it.
almost, and it's yeah, and I have, and it's just been it's been a little weird, a little odd sometimes.
I have I don't know, an immortal friend, shall we say, from Australia. I hope to get you in contact with her. And and she sent me a message last night, a very nice message. And she said, I'd like you to get your opinion on this film. And of course, I started looking it up and so forth. And I was going to buy the DVD and not realizing, then she sent it to me later. It was on YouTube. So, but she sent it to me for a reason, right? And it's about an immortal. And I love immortal movies. I really do. Because although the entirety of the movie may be factually incorrect, in there somewhere, there's something in there I can use. It was sent to me for a reason. Mm-hmm. Someone's interpretation, even though it's theatrical, there's a lesson in there. And don't be dismissive of these lessons. They were sent to you for a reason. And of course, she believes in immortalism. And she sent it to me because for whatever reason, she felt compelled to send it to me. And I will, of course, look at it and I'll give her my feedback. And I've done that numerous times, not so much movies, but a lot of people will send me books, PDF files in particular. And I will, of course, I'm lucky. If I want to study it, I'll go very slow. But I am a speed reader, so I can go through, 150 page book in a couple hours.
Oh yeah, I don't have that gift yet.
Yeah, well, I actually learned it in Catholic school. Believe it or not, I was in elementary school, and they put you in this little machine, and they of course they would test your comprehension with words, and this thing would go across real fast. Like that, I would go like, oh, and I would catch the words, and I would say it would be this, and of course at first it was like weird, but then they had you practice, and I don't know, back then this particular school actually taught me to speed read. So, and what you do when you speed read is you only pick the big words.
Yeah.
Don't do and, the, it, just pick the big words. And you have about a 70% comprehension.
Yeah. I was going to say, you must have a better comprehension when you're actually studying it.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. You miss a lot. But what happens is you get a good, then what I'll do is I'll put it in my library. And then what I'll do is I love especially PDF files because I can do keyword searching.
Yeah.
And then I'll share that on my Facebook page. And then if it's good enough, then it will go to my YouTube channel or my blog, GNOSIS Masonry.
Yeah, exactly. Man, I think I've ran through the gamut of questions that I pretty much had laid out for today. And I know you mentioned that you may have to get going soon, but if you have anything else, any little tidbits regarding the immortality stuff or the process of the Christ oil, or any maybe even advice to people or encouragement if they were interested in Freemasonry, then feel free to mention it.
Sure. All I can tell you is it's an individual quest. Don't let anyone tell you that they've got the answer. Trust your gut, trust the spirit world, and work on your spirituality. I didn't say religion, very, very important. But again, ignorance is not your friend. If you're unwilling to read, if you're unwilling to have faith in this idea, don't do it. Just worship death and live your life and be a good person and move on. But if you're really, really, really interested in the quest for immortality, the mystery, because that is the ultimate mystery, is to achieve immortality. If you're really interested in doing that, there are several avenues, but become a student, become less of a person of the world and more a person of the spirit world. You live in two, right? You live in two worlds, and develop the skill. I would readily admit that I am not a born adept when it came to. I remember talking to my spiritual advisor, and he would tell me all these things. I'm like, man, I wish I had that I don't want to say power, that ability to communicate. He says, if you want it and work at it, you'll get it. And about 3 years later, I got it. Not anything like, and I'm going to be honest with you, nothing like psychics, right? No, that's not quite how it works. those people are incredible. And I'm obviously I don't have that ability, but you can develop this to the point where you can start to trust your gut and your instinct in terms of your spiritual quest for life extension, i.e., immortality. That is the goal of medicine. That is the goal of science, chemistry. And it's always been here. And we know that we have countless stories of people who have achieved it. But don't use your postmodern thinking to guide your spirituality. It will be an obstacle. And don't allow your religious reservation to block your guidance. You know, there's so many people who have so many things against religion. I get it. I get it. You know, they've done some horrible things in the past and currently going on right now. And they will continue to do it because they're people, they're human. But it doesn't mean the literature itself is wrong. Doesn't mean that the writings or the teachings are wrong. And there's like the Bible itself, and of course there are other things. So if that's what you so desire, you'll get it, or only if you work at it. But remember, the spirit world doesn't give credit to ignorance. If you're ignorant, don't expect. You know, today people expect every child gets a trophy because they participated. No, that's not how it works. You know, just because you want it doesn't mean you're going to get it. It is hard work and diligence, and if you so choose to take that quest, it's a worthy one. You will benefit yourself, your spirit, your soul will be greatly improved by studying these things. You'll have a different perspective on life, as a minimum. And of course, Freemasonry says, you know, we have that saying, "It'll make a good man better." Absolutely. As a minimum, you're going to be a far better person by studying the mysteries. Of course, my bias is towards Freemasonry. If you're a man, there is and I've got several brothers who are co-masons, and I respect them. If they're ladies who want to do that, there's a co-masonry group out there in North America. They're very honorable. The stories I've heard of women masons they're doing, you know, in co-masonry they do a better job than men. So, but whatever path you so choose, do that. And the benefits to you will be immediately available. You will be gifted with certain powers. Of course, the most significant is the power of manifestation. And I've given warnings on that, right? Be careful. You only do positive and loving things. To do anything else is the power of 3 will come back to you. If you do something bad, 3 times worse is coming back at you. Don't do it. Don't mess with the dark side of the low magic. Stay with the high magic, white magic. And by the way, Christianity itself and most religions today came out of white magic or high magic. So don't get caught up in the words. And that comes from Eliphas Levi's book, The History of Magic from 1860, Freemason. And so, you know, it's up to you. It's an individual quest. How do you want to do it? Those will be my departing words for the moment. I do hope we can do this again and maybe share some more light with the world.
Yeah, definitely. And I should mention quickly, I meant to bring it up earlier, but for any like, females who may be listening, I know at least from the Taoist perspective, the Mantak Chia books, there is an entire female way of doing that exact same process we were talking about today. I'm not sure
Yeah,
if
I'm going to
you've
be
gone
honest
into
with you.
that much more.
People have asked me, and I honestly tell them, I said, I'm a man, and most of the literature was written for men.
Yeah.
I would love to say that there's a path to it, but I am not knowledgeable about the path for women, only men.
Hmm.
That is a bias of my own. I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time on that because there's so much to study.
Yeah.
I would, in fact, when I first became a Freemason, I remember one of my good friends who since passed away. He basically said, "Hey, I know you're a smart guy. You can spend, as an academic, he said, you can spend the rest of your life studying Freemasonry. You'll never know. You'll never be able to read all that there is. You'll never know all that there is.
Hmm.
Well, then I better live multiple lifespans because I want to know."
Yeah.
Uh,
And I agree with what you were saying about your mindset and stuff. Even like with myself, aside from physical immortality, but just playing basketball, staying in shape. Over the years, I've seen people who are 25 years old and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm getting old now. I'm putting on some weight, whatever. My metabolism slowed down, blah blah." And I always told myself I will never be like one of these people. Like I've been telling myself since I was 8 years old that I'm never gonna get really old or decrepit or anything. And even when I was 20, 21, I thought, I'm just not aging. I'm just deciding not to. Right
Absolutely.
now, because of good habits, and I think this belief to a large degree, I feel just as good as I did when I was 20 years old going on the basketball court.
So let me just throw that in there. I have a master's degree in military history, and from Norwich University, second oldest military academy in the United States. So I will tell you this from an academic perspective. Okay, young men make great soldiers. Okay, and you know why young men make great soldiers?
They have a lot of vigor and excitement for what they're about to do.
Absolutely, they think they're invincible.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and they oftentimes don't have a lot of intelligence, which comes from years of living the intelligence. Now, they make great soldiers because of their physical attributes, their ability to recover rather quickly. But it doesn't matter if you're an immortal or not. Your body will, I don't want to say age, will change.
Hmm.
Um, you will be able to do incredible things in your 20s and 30s. Attain that, you're putting your body at risk,
To
right?
maintain it.
To maintain it. In other words, I'm going to go run a marathon
Right.
when I'm 70 years old. For what purpose does running a marathon at 70 years old prove? You've already run it for 20 years or 50 years or whatever.
Hmm.
Now running is a good idea, right? If your body is designed to run or walk, if you're a little larger like myself,
Yeah.
physical activity is absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
Um, but you don't need to push the limits of physical endurance to achieve immortality.
Yeah. A marathon is more like a feat.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So again, it's also materiality because you're fulfilling your ego. Ego is the biggest obstacle. And talk Manly P. Hall, Albert Pike in particular, they both talk about ego as an obstacle in immortality. Okay. And ego or materiality is wealth, sex, drugs, possessions, athletic awards, right? Listen. I've got numerous state champions, in the shot and disc. I competed in the Four Nations meet and all that, but I did that before I realized uh, that I didn't need to do it. I was fulfilling my ego,
Hmm.
right?
It might have been fun for you too, I guess.
What's
Yeah.
that?
I said it was probably fun for you too,
Oh,
enjoyable.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It was a quest. Every young man has that, whatever they want to do. I get that. But when you get older, you go, really? A lot of the people I competed with, my body is in great shape compared to a lot of them I competed with. Their bodies are falling apart because at least I learned. I stopped at a certain age. I think I stopped when I was 26. A lot of them went on and competed more, and they destroyed their bodies. Somebody, I've heard stories of guys walking around on dialysis, the
Yeah.
kidneys are shot because they use drugs, steroids,
Oh yeah.
and I've heard stories, oh, I got 3 slip discs because they squatted too much.
Yeah. A
Yeah,
lot of not balancing things either too with like yoga or flexibility and
absolutely.
rehab exercises, which is constantly ignored and stuff.
Well, some people aren't into yoga,
Yeah.
so but, there are, there's an exercise called the 5 rights. And I don't know if you're familiar. I gave Johnny Enoch the book of that. You have to ask him about. I
Okay.
have to look it up again. But when we had lunch one time, and so uh, there are other ways, there are other exercises, but flexibility is the key. You can do yoga, that's a good one, but there are other avenues, Western ideas as well
Mm.
about flexibility. But flexibility is important. Mobility is important. Diet is important. There's all these things, but you don't need to win awards. And immortality are not synonymous.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
It's not necessary to do that. I used to, I remember many years ago, just for the fun of it, I studied about a year with some Jehovah's Witnesses. It was a great experience. I enjoyed it very much. And of course, at some point they say, oh, you got to make a decision. Well, I'm not ready. I appreciate the study. I'd love to continue to study, but I'm not going to do it. He said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. You're on the whatever. So we split our ways. One thing I learned about their religion, though, is they don't do competitive sport. They do sport, but they don't do competitive sport.
Oh yeah.
Okay, that was and of course, but like Mormons, they do. They do compete. They're damn good at it. A lot of it. They go on Christian missions and come back and compete in sport and everything else. So, and Catholics, same thing. They're really good at sports, and most religions are okay with it. They weren't. I found that most interesting. And I'm not saying they were right or wrong, but I would say that I think it's sport. I think sport has a very important component in a man's development and a woman's development as well. I think it's very, very important in their physical development as well as their character development in that sense. I believe in sport. But at a certain point, I think it stops serving its purpose. I don't think you need to, be playing professional football when you're 40 years old.
Yeah. And regarding people who live extra long or physical immortals, do you think there's a point or a stage where eventually their age would start to looks like it starts decreasing back into what some would call like a prime
Yeah.
state of
Well,
being?
the Ben
Or
Abba story, if you ever get a chance to listen to that 28, it's on YouTube, 2,800-year-old immortal. He had he talked about the 2,800-year-old guy, and he was married something like 30 times. He went, he'd go 100 years without being married at all, and then all of a sudden he decided to get married, and then of course he changed his appearance. He decided, well, I better look younger to, and by the way, I learned this. Most immortals actually look between 50 and 60.
okay, interesting.
And why do they look between 50 and 60?
Yeah, I mean, I would have assumed maybe that's the point in their life where they achieved that.
Yeah, they're a man who is between late 40s on up to 50 and even in the 60s, but definitely between 50 and 60. They're most respected in society. They usually have attained a position of wealth and notoriety. They're usually making the most money. They're most accepted when they speak, and so forth. Whereas a young man who's in his 18 to 30, and I used to tell my students this all the time. I said, between 18 and 30, the best thing you can do is get an education and get experience, because nobody's going to give you a chance. Why? Because we were all young men and we don't trust young men. But when you turn 30, the switch turns on. You need to be ready, because between 30 and 50, you're going to make most of your money. And that's when you become most successful. You're going to have that ladder. You're going to go up the ladder real quick. But it's still a traumatic time period. You're just not quite trusted. But most immortals look between 50 and 60. And the other alternative is a lot of not young women like 18 or 20, maybe some of them, but late 20s and 30-year-old women are very attracted to 50-year-old men because they still have they usually have the education, they look and they usually have wealth, and they're stable, and so forth and so on. So women are often, they realize that the young man that they were dating was a knucklehead, and so they look for some people more stable. So if they want to have relations, a 50 to 60-year-old is still acceptable to most women, whereas a 70-year-old or an 80-year-old is not.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
and so you basically, a lot of them will stay in that time frame. They might grow for a while and then they'll come back, and you can change through manifestation. You can change your look. And I don't mind telling you, this is a personal experience. But even my son, one of my son, he remembers me before I started this transition, and of course he's into that transition as well. And he says, "Dad, I remember I got a pictures of you, about 15 years ago." And he says, "You look younger today than you did then. My skin was graying. My skin was, starting to get the age spots, and everything else." And he goes, "Dad," and they take two pictures. He goes, you don't even look the same. So yeah, you can make yourself, my skin is more live and my aura is more present. And the first signs of your regeneration will appear in your face. That becomes most evident. It won't necessarily happen in your body right away, but you'll see it in your face. Heaven, right here.
Okay.
So you'll see that. Your skin will get tighter, it will get cleaner, and so forth. So, and a lot of people don't believe I look 61. So,
Yeah.
here nor there on that. But
I was looking at some pictures of you actually from like last year, or maybe 2 years ago and stuff. And I thought, oh, this guy's complexion looks pretty good and stuff.
yeah. And of course, if you're using the one from my Facebook page, that one was done on a cruise. And of course, that was intended to make you look really good.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Maybe it made you look even better.
I'll tell you what, my wife looks good.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Of course, for her age, she damn good.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you can. I would say that you can transform yourself. I would love to say I could look 18 again. I'm not certain of that, but I think you can maintain an age and look a little younger, to some degree. There is, of course, my son, who's now about 30, 31. He's been doing it for some time, and he's got uncharacteristically thick hair on his head.
Okay.
It's like really thick. My hair was never that thick. How'd you do that, son?
Yeah.
He's practicing much of what we talked about.
Okay.
And he started when he was in his early 20s. And he's very much aware of all this stuff. And of course, he's very spiritual.
Yeah.
And so forth. So yeah. I would hope that young men would catch on to this a lot sooner than, trust the old man here. Okay. You can make a difference. And I know you're about 30 or so, right?
36.
Yeah, 36. So you start, you've been doing it for a while. Good looking guy. Keep practicing, keep the mindset, keep the faith, right? Keep the faith that it is possible, and be a student of the mysteries and with your ultimate quest. And let the spirit world guide you. You'll be amazed what can occur. I know it's possible. And that was my message today for doing this. This is the first podcast I've ever done with me showing my face. I've done one several years ago, or two of them several years ago, but it was only audio. And I usually only do audio. But now that I'm retired, the cancel culture can't really attack me. So I'm joking.
Yeah.
I won't have a problem of losing my university job.
Yeah.
So good luck. I'm retired. But I mean no harm to anyone. Anything I said today was purely examples.
Yeah.
I'm neither a Republican or a Democrat. I am a bystander in it all. And I just watch history from the sideline.
Yeah. So you're a libertarian is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
You figured that out, right? By the way, I tell my students, you know what a libertarian is, right?
What?
And they go, oh, what is a libertarian? I said, it's a Republican on crack.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Basically, we're conservative fiscally.
Yeah.
But we're very liberal when it comes to people and policies. And so
Yeah.
one of the things that we got passed in California was the elimination of the 3 strikes law and marijuana. Those are libertarian platforms.
Yes.
That we're so that socially we're kind of like that. But when it comes to money, we're like, this is not going to end well. If you're overspending, you're going to bankrupt us.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, maybe let us know where we can find you at. Now, the YouTube channel, correct me if I'm wrong, is it Immortal Light?
YouTube is Infinite Immortality.
Oh, yeah. I think you had maybe it was another one that was Immortal Light.
Maybe on this video, you could put the links on there. And
I will.
I will do as well. I know we're going to share this video.
Yeah.
And I will put the link below to all 3 of them. My blog is GNOSIS Masonry. And then my Facebook is Immortal Light.
Yeah. The Facebook page is great, and the blog is actually fantastic. I've read some of the articles in there, and it's just really interesting stuff. And it's nice to read it. I like reading stuff. I find I comprehend it a bit better, and I can go through it again.
Right.
And then the YouTube channel, of course, as you said, is Infinite Immortality, and there's some great videos on there. I've gone through almost all of them now.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
It's relatively new. It's only about 3 months old or so.
Yeah.
Uh, I knew I was retiring, so I decided to come out a little bit more than I normally do. I try to keep under the profile
Yeah.
and not become too much of a target. But
Yeah. 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 Okay. Great. I will put the links here in the description, and
great.
for anybody watching, maybe
Chad,
like
thank
and
you. Wonderful, wonderful experience. You're doing humanity a great service by doing these interviews, enlightening the world.
yeah.
Remember, ignorance is nobody's friend, right? People need to be awakened to these facts. We've been lied to too long for political or religious reasons. Not only the mysteries, but other things. Atlantis, aliens, whatever.
Hmm.
Uh, we, let's have a discussion. Let's talk about these things, and let's let people make their own decision. Uh,
Yeah.
Stop being the pundit who dismisses everything. I really don't. In fact, when people start dismissing something, I become more interested. If you
Yeah.
want to buy a book, I want to read it. When you ban a YouTube channel, I want to find. I want to. What was this guy banned for? I want to know what it is.
Yeah. It's good to bring all the information
Absolutely.
in, take it all in, and then make your decisions afterwards.
Let people make a decision for themselves.
I heard, InfoWars is doing better business than ever since they got banned off so many things. So it's one example.
Absolutely. Most, of course, I do everything. I'm not about money. That's a very important point. I should last departing thought.
Sure.
When it comes to money, if you are attempting to serve humanity, you're not making money.
Hmm.
Okay, it counters what you're doing. So many immortals do things for free, and to serve humanity in where you're not making a profit. So I don't do anything to personally benefit myself.
Yeah.
That's not my objective, and I hope that's not the objective of most people seeking a higher understanding. And that should be a clue to those people who say, "Oh, I need to join the Illuminati and pay $2.99 to join it." What? No, I need lessons in this because I want that. No, if it's not free, I hate to tell you, it's probably not just.
Yeah. I would tend to agree on that.
That's my opinion.
Yeah.
There are those people who take that lesson seriously and they're willing to share that information on whether it be YouTube or every other channel. And hopefully, they don't get banned. They say something inappropriate.
Yeah. Got to try to get on lots of platforms nowadays.
But what we're saying is very important. We're not attacking institutions, right? We're
Yeah.
not attacking political parties. We're not doing any of that. We might have used some things as an example, but that's not our.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the goal of the mysteries. I think we need to learn and be safe and understand history, because ignorance is not your friend, and it can harm you greatly. There are many paths to immortality, but ignorance is not one of them. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll have to get you back on here again sometime. I'm sure I'll have a
Okay.
lot more questions. And thank you. You've been very generous with your
Thank you,
time. And
Chad. And I hope this video is successful on your end.
yeah, yeah, hopefully, even if it doesn't happen in 1 week, maybe eventually we'll see how it goes.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so check you out there on YouTube and stuff. If anybody watching this video, maybe try liking, subscribing, of course, the usual stuff, share it.
Absolutely.
And we'll see you next time on episode 4 of the Mystical Mountain podcast. All right. See ya.